City Council Successor Agency to the Redevelopment Agency meeting to order. Would you please all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Just as a reminder to my colleagues, I think you probably overheard some of the conversation. We've been having a little bit of technical difficulty with the microphones turning on and off, so please try to remember to make sure that your red light is on. The acoustics in here are so good you don't need them actually, but nobody at home will hear us if they're off. Changes to the order of agenda. Jeff, are there any changes the staff is recommending?
No changes from staff this evening, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any changes from the dais? All right, hearing none, we will move on to report from closed session. Greg.
Mr. Mayor, there is no report from closed session tonight.
Thank you for that. That brings us to council communications and announcements. Cameron.
Nothing to report tonight, Mr. Mayor.
Matt?
Yeah, I would like to report on two things. They are not really related to meetings we attend or anything like that, but one's a good news item and one is not such a good news item in my estimation. The good news item is that a resident of San Carlos, a couple, celebrated this weekend their 50th wedding anniversary, and I think that's commendable. That is John and Mary Montalbano. Anybody that can stay married for 50 years and have a good, strong family like that, that's worth mentioning. The other item that I wanted to mention, and like I said, it's not really a San Carlos item per se, but I feel inclined as an elected official to say something about it because it strongly bothers me, and it also bothers me as a small business owner, and that has to do with a case in Arnold's Park, Iowa, where a lady by the name of Carol Hinders has basically had her business shut down by the federal government, who came along and said they took her bank account because she was making deposits under $10,000 each time. And I think, we just pledged allegiance to the flag. We just, a country where there's liberty and justice for all. And it really bothers me as an elected official that we have a federal government that can swoop in and close down a lady's Mexican food business because she makes deposits to her bank account less than $10,000 each time. I do that in my business, and if the federal government can do that, that's very problematic in my estimation. So I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you, Matt. Bob?
Mr. Mayor, I have nothing this evening.
Okay, Ron?
Thank you, Mr. Here we go again.
Give it a second. There you go.
Hear me now? All right. Just a couple things. I went to the Housing Leadership Day last Friday and attended the luncheon. It's a full-day program dedicated solely to all the housing issues that we face in the Bay Area, essentially between San Francisco and San Jose. And it was interesting that one of the moderators of the panel mentioned that the average income in the Bay Area is $107,000. The average income for the rest of the country is $52,000. He said the people, and I also sat next to the director of HIP Housing on whose board I used to sit, and she mentioned that they used to look for housing for people that young mothers who were single and through some misfortune didn't have a place to live, and they did a lot of shared housing and that sort of thing. Now they are finding places to live for young professionals who make pretty good money, $70,000, $80,000 a year, and still can't find a place to live. So that sort of underscored our housing shortage. Also, last week, in getting ready for the opening of Palo Alto Medical Foundation, I was fortunate to attend the sort of a pre-opening reception for the members of the Citizens Advisory Committee, and I sat on that committee when the project was coming before council, so we got a nice little tour of the facility. If anybody hasn't, obviously no one's seen it because it hasn't opened yet, but there is an opening celebration on November 22nd, I believe. It's a Saturday, and the facility will be open. It actually opens on November 17th, but they're going to have sort of an open house on the 22nd. I encourage people to attend it. really has a lot of state-of-the-art equipment, and it's a beautiful facility. And the last thing is not council related, but I went to Florida last week and celebrated for the first time I was able to be with my father on his birthday in probably 50 years. He turned 94, so it was great to be with my dad. That's it.
Thank you, Ron. I just had a few items. I'm glad, actually, that they had the pre-opening reception for the members of the advisory committee on PAMP, because when they approached me about the opening ceremonies, I said, you have to figure out a way to make sure Ron's there. As Ron's involved, too, and they said they had talked to you and you were going to be out of town or just getting back.
Yeah, and I got back early, so I decided to go.
So, I'm talking about the November 22nd one.
Oh.
Yeah, so. Last week, I attended the SBWMA, the trash agency, South Bayside Waste Management Authority board meeting. Probably the only thing of significance there is, as expected, the board did adopt its first ever ordinance to require commercial haulers to file reports, essentially, with SBWMA on the amount of trash that they are handling. For everybody's benefit, that's mostly like if Safeway does not use Recology. They have their own contract service that they use. So those contractors, if they're based locally now, will be under an obligation to report to SBWMA and at least theoretically be fined if they don't meet it. That was something you may remember I opposed just because I felt individual cities should be doing that, but I was in the minority on it. And then lastly, I in these chambers, had the opportunity to address a group of young men and some of their mothers at the Young Men's Service League. I was given that opportunity because Cameron was out of town and was unable to make the appearance there. He had asked me to substitute for him. It's a really neat organization that I had never heard of before. It's basically a service organization that encourages young men of high school age to work with their mothers in the spirit of public service and philanthropy. So if there are any mothers out there who are looking for a way to connect with their young men of high school age in a non-confrontative fashion, in a constructive fashion, I would definitely encourage you to look into it. It seems it's a very nice organization, a very, very sharp group of young men. Jeff, does staff have any comments that you'd like to provide?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, three this evening. First and foremost, and probably the most important item that I'll mention tonight is that the San Francisco Giants are currently leading the Kansas City Royals 3-2 in the World Series. Secondly, I'd just like to mention there's been quite a bit of discussion in the community on various forums over the last week or 10 days about the Carlos Club sign. And the city put out some information today on Facebook and our other social media outlets, letting the public know that we're working with the owners right now. We're looking to bring on board a historical consultant to study the sign and some of the original facade aspects of the Carlos Club building. Right now, the current owner's been cooperative in terms of taking the cover off the sign. I know they would like to make some changes, so we'll study those. What the city may or may not be able to do may be limited to the extent that we can do anything as a city organization moving forward. That will come to council in due time before any decisions are made. But right now we're just trying to explore what the city's role could be in the potential preservation of a potentially historic site. And finally, I'd like to ask Stan Maupin if he would give us a brief update on the state of Ebola in the county's response to the potential threat.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Stan Maupin, your deputy fire chief. I'm not sure that I can talk about the entire state of Ebola in its entirety tonight, but I wanted to give you a quick update for yourselves and the public about public safety's ability to respond to a case should it ever come to San Mateo County and San Carlos in particular. Last Friday, County Health was able to finally get some policies and procedures together for the response of public safety to an event like this. And a couple of the first steps that come into play was that the screening of the potential of this for a 911 or emergent medical call starts from the moment the person calls 911. County dispatch is set up to do some screening. They have a screening protocol to determine if the person is a risk or at risk of being exposed. Once that is determined, first responders are notified before they're en route. Once they arrive on scene, regardless of what the update has been, first responders will also screen the patient prior to making contact for further, just to make sure that we haven't missed something in the dispatch protocol. Once that occurs, should there be a case or should be an indicator that we need to take precautions, what's happening today is that AMR, the private ambulance company that provides transport to the county, has the equipment that we need for personal protection. We don't view Ebola as an emergent situation, so we have the ability to take a moment and step back and make sure our folks are protected. And then at that point, what will happen is we will then limit our exposure for personnel and then have the person transported. There has been a vehicle set aside countywide for the specific reason of transporting anybody suspected of having Ebola. We also have the ability of making sure that we limit, again, the first responders who are exposed or potentially exposed to this. And then they have set aside specific receiving facilities for anybody that's suspected of this. At this time, we don't anticipate anything coming about any time in the near future, but we are actively, as of last Friday, screening and taking these precautions. It's our goal in the future to have this personal protection equipment for our first responders actually with each unit instead of having to rely on just waiting for AMR to arrive on scene with their equipment. Again, at this time, we don't anticipate anything being exposed or coming to San Carlos and San Mateo County specifically, but we just wanted you to know and the public to know that the first responders, law enforcement and fire and EMS are ready and prepared for should this ever occur.
Thank you, Stan. Jeff, actually, just as a brief comment on your Carlos Club announcement, since you and I have been corresponding about that, I neglected to mention to you that when I walked by there the other night, just so staff is aware of it, all of the light bulbs in the Carlos Club sign and the neon sign on the side of the building that said Carlos have been removed. So even if one wished to turn the sign back on at this point, there would be nothing to show for it. All right, that brings us to public comment. This is a section of the meeting set aside for individuals to address the council on whatever topic they choose. This is primarily intended for topics that are not on the agenda because we will provide time for public input on each of the agenda topics as we move through them. Crystal, at this point, I don't have any cards, so is there anybody who wishes to address the council on an item not on the agenda? Yes, please, if you'd step to the microphone, and if we could ask you to fill a card out at the end, that would be great.
Sure.
And just because we have some new technology here, I used to hold up cards to let people know they were coming close to the end of their 2 minutes, but there should be a little indicator there.
Yes.
That'll start turning yellow and then red to indicate how much time you have left. Okay?
Yes, my name is Deborah Barron. I live at 800 Cordilleras. I have lived there for the last 26 years. The reason I am here is because of the cement concrete construction that is happening on the Cordilleras and Elizabeth Street, and in my opinion is not complete. It is the corner that comes around towards the stop sign on Elizabeth side. I've spoken with the city manager twice. The city inspector finally got back to me one time. That took a couple of days. Basically, they both agreed that it does not look good, but there is no money in the budget to put some asphalt towards the end of where the cement ends. So the cement sidewalk ends and there's a pile of dirt. So there is no asphalt that should match the other two sides on this side and that side. So I think down the road, once the rain comes, the mud is going to be washed away and that could become a safety hazard. So I just think that's something that the city needs to look into. And I was told to come here to the city council to see if the city council can basically rectify the problem and put some asphalt in there. So I'm asking for funds just to do that.
Okay. Thank you. Jeff, can staff look into that and get back to the council with their recommendation?
We sure can. And if you'd like, I think, do we have an image of this area? If you'd like to see exactly what we're talking about, I think we actually have an image we can show you right now.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. Jay Walter, Public Works Director. And
I don't have it.
oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Hit the blue. I'm sorry. Apologize. Sorry.
We just had we had put together just a few pictures from the project itself to be able to let council see sort of the issue that Ms. Barron has brought forward. And my staff has talked to her, and she is correct in at least in what she has said so far, that at this point we have exhausted our budget for the project. So just to back up a little bit, council will remember that the project at the corner of Cordilleras and Elizabeth was as a result of the community interaction with the city and the council's decision to go ahead and authorize the construction of a raised crosswalk, which you can see in the image on your screen. And the area that's to the left is Ms. Barron's property at that corner of Elizabeth and Cordilleras. And the issue as it relates to that is, I think I've got the right spot on the image. So if council will look, you can see that that corner has the ramp that's shown, which is the ADA ramp that we needed to put in with the project. And the back end of that little piece of sidewalk that we placed is the area of her concern, which has the dirt that comes up to it and the asphalt street that's just slightly in front of it. And obviously the concern there is that if rains come and that washes away, then that becomes a problem from an accessibility standpoint. But if council will look at the plan image that's on the right of that slide, where the red arrow comes away, the improvements that were contemplated and put together with the project were really focused on that crosswalk across Cordilleras. We did not ever have an intent to create more sidewalk or continue sidewalks away from the corners. And the project, as it turned out, basically used up the $75,000 that we had allocated for it. So at this point, we really don't have any more funding within the project. But that's the primary area of concern, if I've captured that correctly. Right. And then the council will look at this picture, and the red arrow will show that that's the kind of the opposite corner on or across Elizabeth on Cordilleras. And there's a small asphalt ramp at the back edge of that. And the area beyond it was already asphalt. So we matched up that area asphalt to asphalt. That was part of the project. But this corner back on this side, it didn't have asphalt along that back edge. It had natural dirt surface there, and again we matched into what was there. So that's the difference on the two. And on the other side, you can see we matched up to sidewalk on the one sort of downhill side, and then a curb that goes back around the corner. And in the upper, no, that's essentially the last picture that I wanted to show you. But definitely a difference between the corner here and the corner here.
Mr. Rubens, can I ask a question? Can I ask him a question?
Actually, yeah, I'd like some clarification. I was a little surprised that after a public comment, we essentially have a staff presentation that's not on the agenda.
There. Yeah, I think I think this was staff's basic report to you about the conditions, but we can't really take any. I mean, you can ask a question, but we can't really take any action.
I understand.
Or
I just want to ask a question.
Sure.
Okay.
If there was money in the budget, or you could find money somewhere, would you improve that dirt that the young lady is asking about, or not?
I guess my first response would be no, simply because that is an area that ends in the dirt now, and we don't. I would wonder how far I'd have to chase that with asphalt to create a sidewalk area there.
I understand, except for the fact that before it was all brown, or it was all light brown, it was all flat, it was all there, whatever. If it washed away, whatever happened. You've added dirt. If you didn't add any dirt, I'd be right with you. But you added dirt. I mean, I'd say the project added dirt, and anyway. So anyway,
Would you like to ask the item to come back?
yeah, I personally would like the item to
Okay.
come back.
Is there
Except that I'm not sure that it even needs to come back. But
That's exactly where I was going to go.
Yeah, I just think it should be done, but I mean, that's just again, I'm not an engineer. Because you added dirt. If you didn't add any dirt,
Okay, all right, I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt because I think we're actually discussing the
right.
item, so that's why I was saying.
apologize.
No, it's okay.
But open Pandora's box here.
I think the way I left it is I asked staff to look into this and come back with a further report on this, so let's do that. Okay? Yeah, Matt, in fact, I was going to ask you, I noticed your request to speak light is on.
I was just going to add that if Mr. Walters could bring back to us alternatives from the cheapest thing of doing the grass and the tube things to hold it up for the winter and see what we do after that, all the way to doing give us some options.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay.
Thank you. I have one other speaker card that has appeared since we started this, and if there's anybody else who wishes to address the council on items not on the agenda, please fill a card out. And Deborah, I think it was, please, if you could also remember to fill a card out, that would be great. They are on the side table over there under the public speaking request station. So Sandy Althouse.
Hi, I'm Sandy Althouse. I live at 1426 Magnolia. And I just wanted to bring to the council's attention personally, I know you've heard from me in emails before, to address the changes to the Carlos Club and to its sign, and how iconic the sign is along El Camino. It distinguishes us from all the other cities along the peninsula since 1947. It's been noted and rendered in many photographs, paintings, and lots of different artworks, including a very well-known greeting card. The building has been identified as eligible for the National Registry, and it was honored for preservation in a 1991 remodel. Many changes, unfortunately, have already been made to the sign, and that was done outside of the city's permitting process, including now removing neon tubing from its original design. The exterior of the letters Carlos, all the tubing has been removed from that, and to replace tubing, if it does get done, is very expensive and it's a difficult process. I'm here representing the San Carlos Heritage Association, and we would just like to know if the city has started the environmental review process, and is there anything else that we could do to help? I know we've sent some names of architectural historians that have, including one that actually did the review in 1991 when that remodel was done. And we'd also like to thank the City Council very much and the staff for their very prompt response to all these changes. And we look forward to working with you, and we really hope that we can do what we can to keep this iconic sign as the gateway to the city of good living. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. Is there anybody else who wishes to address the council on items not on the agenda? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to the consent calendar. These are items that are approved en masse unless a member of the council wishes to remove one or more items to be dealt with individually. Are there any items that my colleagues would like to remove? Matt.
I'm switched over to a different part here, so I don't know what item it is, but the one about the crossing.
I believe that's 9G or 7G, excuse me. So we will remove 7G and take that up afterwards. Anything else?
Mr. Mayor, seeing Mr. Porter here, I figured
I already got, yeah.
I was wondering if you'd take it up now instead of at the end. He's going to have to wait to the end.
I'm going to.
I'm sorry, I apologize. I thought you said you were going to take it up at the end.
No, if I did, I meant to say we'll take it up later. And then I was going to explain that I meant afterwards. So I'd like to, is there a motion to approve the consent calendar absent item 7G?
So moved. Sorry. You got to be fast.
Would you like to second?
I'll second it.
You got to be.
There you go. Crystal, please call the roll.
Councilmember Collins?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott? Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Mayor Obert?
Yes. All right. We will take up item 7G at this point, just to save Mr. Porter the burden of having to stay here till 11 o'clock at night. Is there a staff presentation on this, Jeff?
There's not a formal presentation prepared for this item. We'd be happy to
Answer questions?
answer questions or have a back and forth dialogue if it helps.
Matt, did you have a question that you wish to ask? Or?
Yeah. Here we go. I had a couple of questions. One is, did we look at all what is the practice with other jurisdictions? Is this typical that a city shares in the cost of crossing guards, or perhaps they take it on completely and, with their police department, or how's this typically done?
I could not answer that.
I can actually shed a little bit of light on that because we looked at this several years ago, and the answer to your question is it falls all across the spectrum that you described, from cities who don't do it at all to cities who do it entirely themselves to cities who share the responsibility with the school district. We in the past have maintained that we would rather not have city resources dedicated to actually running the program. Participating in the program is one thing, but we haven't wanted to run it ourselves, and the school district stepped in and has done that.
It's been happening with all of them. So.
Okay. And it looks like there's just, if I read this correctly, there's just a couple of sites that we're talking about, but obviously there's other sites in town which arguably could be just as critical or be coming online. And so I'm looking down the road and wondering, what are we looking at here? Has there been discussions about that?
Have Mr. Porter answer that question.
Thank you. This is really a pilot project that we've established here, and it was a real grassroots effort from a number of concerned parents, faculty, and staff about two major intersections at our middle schools. The one at Dartmouth and San Carlos, the other one being Cedar and Arroyo. And it, through a lot of discussion and feedback from parents in the community about the safety of their kids, we thought it would be good to get some professional support at those two critical intersections and see if we couldn't start alleviating some of the problems and concerns that people had, and that we made a safer route for kids to get to school. These two intersections were identified because of the amount of traffic, both pedestrian and vehicular traffic, and really the need to try to monitor this and see if there was market improvement in terms of both the safety of the children and just kind of escorting people through that. So again, it's a pilot project that we're doing. We'll be taking a close look at the results of it. Really, there weren't more encompassing intersections that we could really take on at this time.
Thank you, Robert.
Sure.
So why is... You said there you can't take up other intersections at this time. Is it just a budgetary issue?
It's a budgetary issue.
Okay, so what are we looking at down the road, though? Because the reason I ask is, we just had somebody here who lives on Cordilleras, and we as a city have done a number of things. The traffic on Cordilleras, but as you know, the crossing there, and I think I don't know if that's Bell or which street that is. But I've driven through there a couple of times, and the poor parents are out there trying to act as crossing guards. It's very confusing, and it looks very dangerous. Right. So, and I don't know about. I guess the other one would be Melody. I don't know. Tell me what are the other sites we would be looking at?
Well, we took these two sites because of basically the size of the student population.
All right.
If you look at those two, the Tierra Linda and Central Middle School site, those have the most heavily populated student areas. And we can't afford, it would be nice to have crossing guards at the Cedar and St. Francis intersection for kids going to White Oaks. Obviously, the intersection over by Britton Acres, there would be, it would be a nice have. But again, based really on the conversations that we were having and really kind of the outgrowth of what parents were saying, these were the two critical intersections. And certainly, again, the most heavily populated and trafficked by vehicles.
So what I still haven't heard is an answer to my question about looking down the road.
Right.
What are we looking at down the road? Are we looking to do the other school sites, and if so, how many? And
I think at this point, looking down the road, it's a matter of can we commit to these two particular intersections if we feel like the information that we get and the feedback we get that this is a a worthwhile venture.
Okay. Thank you for answering the questions.
Thank you, Robert. Any other questions? Do we have anybody from the public who wishes to address the council on this item? Okay. Seeing none, I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I move to adopt resolution number 2014-105,
105.
a resolution of the City Council of the City of San Carlos agreeing to share in the cost of crossing guards with the San Carlos School District and appropriating $11,433 for this purpose.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any call for discussion?
Yeah, I have some comments about it. I'm troubled by the way this has been brought to us. It's just landed on our lap, and I understand it was discussed at the 2+2. I'm all in favor of increasing safety, but what I'm not hearing is what's the plan for the future. And what I see, what I think is going to happen here is it is going to be successful. It's got to be better than what's going on now. But the trouble I have with it is what it says to the other school sites. And you're going to get demand almost immediately because it's going to be successful. As it, it should be. It should be addressed. But I would rather we did this from the approach of comprehensive, all school sites, and we do what we need to do to find the money to increase the safety at these school sites. I am really troubled when I drive Cordilleras and I go through there and I see what's going on with those poor parents out there trying to do what they can for safety, and they're not professionally trained, they're volunteer trained, and it shows. No disrespect to the parents who are giving their best effort, but it does show. So I don't know, I am really conflicted by this because of the way it's been presented to us at the council here and kind of thrown in our laps, and the lack of it from my perspective, and again, it's because of the way it's being presented, it doesn't look comprehensive enough. Like it's really well thought out, and what are we going to be doing in the future? How soon are we going to be doing it in the future? And what is it going to mean to us as a city in terms of our budget? And I think we needed a better heads up on it. No disrespect to anybody, but I'm just, I'm going by my gut here a little bit. So,
a couple of comments to that. Since I am one of the two council members who sits on the 2+2, I actually would be all in favor of putting an item on a future agenda to have staff come back, presumably after working with the school district on a more comprehensive review, if you'd like to see that. I'd be happy to do that. I'm happy to support that. I'm seeing you nod your heads, so that's two of us, so we'll get that put on the agenda. In the meantime, I think my reaction to it was this is better than what we have heretofore, and it's something that the school district approached the city on. It's what the school district had scoped out doing, and it seemed to me to be a reasonable thing to try and improve public safety. And can we perhaps improve public safety further? Absolutely. And let's look at that. But that doesn't, for me, I'm comfortable saying I don't have to wait for the entire comprehensive plan to do something that looks like it makes some sense. So that's just my comment on that. But we'll add that more comprehensive review to a future agenda. Anybody want to say anything else?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
And I'll just chime in as the other member of the 2+2 committee. I think, the city's done a lot of things over the years to help out with school safety and particularly safe routes to schools. We've paid for a traffic safety officer on Cordilleras up until recently, and I believe that officer is still there for this school year. Is that not right? And we've done some, we just talked about some intersection improvements on Cordilleras. I'd echo what Mark said. This is a request that comes from the school district as they're looking for strategies to improve safety of kids walking to school, and I'm happy to participate in it. And I think, as we get results from it, we'll continue to learn and find other strategies in the future. So.
All right. Yes, Jeff.
Yeah, just by way of moving forward, I might suggest the council, rather than refer this to an upcoming agenda item, refer it back to the 2+2 committee representatives to work through the 2+2 to develop a joint, the potential for a joint proposal between the city and the school district that could then come back to the council.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, go ahead.
That's partly what I'm feeling here is being landed on. And what I would prefer is that we actually do discuss it as a council and look at the issue, perhaps have Mr. Porter come and give us a presentation, but we develop our position so that we can send our 2+2 committee to a meeting with a position that we have as a city council. I think it's important, and I don't have any qualms with us sharing it, because it seems to me it is a city issue as much as it is a school district issue. It's just one of those items where, I don't mind sharing it. I just want a more comprehensive approach, and I'm not willing to spend money until I've seen that comprehensive approach.
Well, Greg, can I take an informal poll of the dais to see who's willing to follow Mr. Maltby's suggestion versus Matt's suggestion?
Good luck with that.
There you go.
I'm interpreting what's being discussed as agenda setting, which is allowed to be done at this stage of the meeting.
Thank you. Thought so, but always pays to check. And I wanted to see you wrestle with your microphone anyway. What's the pleasure of the dais? How would you like to proceed?
I'm happy for it to go to the 2+2. I think that's the appropriate place.
I have no problem with that.
2+2.
Okay. Then that's what we will do. Thank you. Any further discussion? Crystal, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Collins?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
No.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Mayor Obert?
Yes. Okay, that brings us to item 8A, which is a report to council, update on potential fire station consolidation. Good to see you back again, Stan. It's been a long time.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I'm still Stan Moffin, your deputy fire chief. If you'll remember back prior to October 1st of 2011, as the question of fire service delivery in San Carlos was being discussed and evaluated, the options for delivering fire service were being looked at, and one of the ones that was discussed was the potential for fire station consolidation to reduce operating costs and give a better service delivery. Since that time, we've done a study with a consultant, and I'm here to present the results of just what the consultant has said. There's no action required at this time. FireStats, a consulting company, was contracted to conduct an analysis of the fire station locations in Redwood City, San Carlos, and the San Mateo County Station 18, which is up near Edgewood and Crestview. The main purpose of this was to see if the three stations are really in the best place that can be afforded to deliver the best level of service for the most cost-effective method also. Some of the other items that were looked at was the ability for these resources to be able to deliver services into the higher demand parts of each city, which is critical to our functioning on a day-to-day basis. And also evaluate these possibility of these stations being consolidated for cost savings and better service delivery. At the time, in late 2012, we were approached by this, San Mateo County to include Station 18 into our evaluation of consolidating stations. Since that time, though, we've had no further contact with the county on this issue, and so we are currently moving forward with just evaluating Station 12 in Redwood City and Station 16 in San Carlos for possible consolidation. Just for reference, Station 12 is at 3700 Jefferson Avenue. It's at the corner of Jefferson and Highland. It was built in 1969. It's 45 years old and due for replacement. And Station 16 is at Howard and Alameda, and it was built in 1960, 54 years old and also in need of replacement. When we looked at what some possibilities are, certainly cost-wise, the average cost of a fire station today, depending on how you configure it, can be anywhere from $4 to $7 million. We're figuring about $100,000 average approximate annual operating costs. And then the approximate cost of staffing a one-unit fire station is about $1.9 million with 3 people. And I say a Type 1 fire engine is the type of fire engine you're used to seeing every day in the city of San Carlos. And of course, that's 3 people on 3 shifts. So obviously what they look at is the sharing of costs to be determined at a later date, but the possibility of the sharing of the costs is there's some one-time savings for each city and then ongoing savings also. What we did was we evaluated 5 years of response data, The contractor actually put together a realistic database to determine travel times. We didn't just use Google Maps. We didn't just reference an off-the-shelf program. He actually created a custom program that evaluated the road conditions in San Carlos and Redwood City, travel times, ongoing traffic patterns, and was able to fairly accurately predict our actual response times. As we looked at it, we looked at, as you can see, there's the numbers of anywhere from 6 to 9 minutes response time for the first unit and the second unit arriving on scene. And that was important to us also, as if the first unit's not in service, the second unit coming from further away has to arrive within a certain threshold also. We applied the evaluation to the current stations as they are now, and we also applied this evaluation to 4 possible new locations that we identified through this analysis looking at a joint station. Those 4 locations that we evaluated were Edgewood and Alameda, Blandford and Alameda, which is just south of Edgewood, Whipple Avenue and Circle Road, which is right near Sequoia Hospital, and then Oak Knoll Drive and Canyon Road, which is up further up into the area near the Canyon Inn and those areas up there. What we found when we evaluated that was that using 6 minutes as a threshold for response time for arriving on scene, the locations that we evaluated along with the current locations, there was no substantial change in meeting the 6-minute threshold. When we looked especially specifically from Edgewood and Alameda, we found that the response times meeting the 6-minute threshold were exactly the same. The other concept we looked at was having a 2-unit station there, which was what we would recommend should we come to this, is the fact that when one unit is drawn into other resource areas, we'll have another unit in that station ready to go. So essentially we have automatic coverage in each station as it happens. Currently, the 2 stations we're evaluating as we sat on the map, Station 16 and Station 12 in Redwood City. This is one of the possible new locations we're looking at near Sequoia Hospital to put a joint station in. You can see it's kind of a almost halfway between the 2 stations as the crow flies. Response time, though, again, they did confirm that we can meet that 6-minute threshold as a maximum, and we would certainly be under 6 minutes in most cases. One of the items that works to our favor in this is by bringing Station 12 in Redwood City further down the hill. We have a verbal agreement, and we've been practicing for quite a while with Station 19 in Woodside, which is literally just up the road from 12. They can bring them further down, so we still have the coverage that we need if we were to move 12 into a joint location with 16. We still have the ability to meet our response times with 19 from Woodside covering us also where they are located. They're about just under 1.5 miles away from Station 12, which is extremely close when we look at the station layouts in the county. Traditionally, when fire stations were built, they were built as cities were standalone. So most fire stations were placed in the city where it best suited response times to meet the circle of the city. The concept of placing fire stations on the borders of cities was not considered because the type of agreement we have today wasn't even thought of at that time. Really moving fire stations to the borders of cities as we share resources is really something we need to look at in the future. And we think that we're going to be, should we go forward with this concept, we'll be seeing more of this in the county, and there's already talk of doing these types of practices also. The possibilities also we'd like to look at is make it more than just a fire station. What's the community value? Some of the ideas we just came up with was we could have a joint community room that can be used by both cities. We all know that the community rooms and access for public to hold meetings and those types of things, there's never enough in any jurisdiction. So we look at the value to the community. It can serve as an additional backup EOC for both cities should be needed. And then there's all kinds of other potential uses we need to evaluate. Just as a reference, future possible next actions, getting a consultant to evaluate possible sites and work to acquire a site, RFP for a contract, RFP for a project manager, and build the station. Again, that's all I have for this evening. It was just meant to be an update. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Stan. Questions for Stan? Cameron.
Thanks, Dan. To me, a lot of this is a topic that's been talked about, obviously, for quite some time. A lot of it comes down to the numbers, and I'm hoping perhaps the next time we talk about it, we could look at some of those numbers. I mean, you cited what the annual cost of running a fire station is and what the cost of building a new fire station in it, but it's hard to extrapolate from that whether that would result in net savings for the city of San Carlos, for the whole overall fire system. I would really like to see that kind of information. I don't know if you can speak to that anecdotally.
I can give you just some of the scenarios we're evaluating would be different staffing models. Instead of just putting 2 fire engines into one fire station, we would look at different staffing models that would reduce the number of personnel in that station. So there's, we'll be looking at savings in that realm also. But yeah, I'd be happy to look at
And does that flow to the city, or does it flow to the city of Redwood City, or to both?
At this point, we're looking at shared costs. So we would look at shared savings also at that point.
Okay.
So.
And then I think the big other question that I'd love to look at the next time we talk about this is what happens if at some point in the future we sever our contract with the city of Redwood City? Who would own that station? Would we be left with a major diminished capacity of fire stations? And maybe you could speak to that a little bit, but I'd be interested to hear more about that.
Yeah, I can't speak to what an arrangement would be, obviously, but I do know of jurisdictions that have done something similar to this, and one possibility, of course, is that if the 2 fire departments were to sever relations, they could still occupy the same station. Just 2 fire departments occupying one station is one option I've seen, but we'd certainly look to that and get you some more information.
Okay, and then. The last thing is, there has been some tentative conversations about further fire consolidation on the peninsula, and I know, probably studies aren't warranted of, additional fire consolidation to the north, but it would just be interesting to think about geographically where other fire stations are laid out in Belmont, San Mateo, Foster City, et cetera, and what, hypothetical implications that would have for overall regional capacity. So that's all for me.
Okay.
Thanks.
Ron.
Thank you, Mark. Actually, I was going to ask the same question that Cameron asked. I thought, was he looking at my notes? But then I thought about sort of a variation on that question, and that is, and this is just purely speculation at this point, but I'm just wondering, along this theme of future consolidation, but if you were, say, planning a South County fire agreement today that included Menlo Park, Atherton, Redwood City, San Carlos, Belmont, et cetera, would this particular consolidation still make sense, or does it only make sense in the relationship of San Carlos and Redwood City? Would this be something that we would still look at in a larger context?
Absolutely. I think that this would just be the first stepping stone. I can think of a whole bunch of locations already, just off the top of my head, that I would say would be ripe for this type of an arrangement. And again, there's been a lot of discussion at this. Central County Fire made an attempt at doing a temporary station, joint station, for political reasons that were separate of the fire service. That didn't come off. But I can think of, in the zone you're talking about, I can think of a couple different locations that would happen. So again, I would view this as like a stepping stone. It would be just the first one out of the box.
Okay. Thank you.
Matt.
I'm going to ask the same question, but different again.
Okay.
And, chiefs talk. I know that. So what's being said? How are they watching this in terms of future consolidation and so forth? How's this being looked at?
Right now, we're focusing on this. They are looking at it to see what we do, to see how it works. They're really looking at the methodology we're using more than anything at this point, because I think they're doing the same thing. Like I said, they see potential for this down the road. So really, right now, when we get the chiefs together and they start doing their thing, it's a lot of how are you doing this? What methods are you using? How's it coming about? And let us know how it goes, kind of thing. So that's kind of where we're at right now. There's still a firm movement in the county to keep consolidation or regionalization in the front, in the fore. And then how that looks, we'll see. As you're well aware, there's been several different models of regionalization or consolidation. And quite frankly, not because we're all sitting in the same room, but I think that the one that we have is probably the best model that's got staying power out of all of them, quite frankly.
Good. Okay. Thanks. The other question I had, you kind of hit on it a little bit about possibilities to make it more than just a station, but I was even thinking in terms of, I'll just ask the question, what are you thinking in terms of garage space and, equipment that might be held there, because we had hazmat, we gave it up. In the past we've had, like Woodside actually has a ambulance that they run out of one of their stations. We used to have truck service. We don't have truck service anymore. Are all those things being
thought about?
Absolutely. And the trend right now is when building fire stations is to always, double the number of units that you're putting in the station in your thought when planning this out. We've seen cases where, again, things that people have done things that they all of a sudden they have, heavy or expensive pieces of equipment sitting outside, which they don't want to do.
Yeah, we don't want that.
Yeah. And so we definitely, we're always short on space. And so any chance we get to increase our storage, we would definitely look at. If we were to run our plan is to look at running 2 units out of the station, we would definitely have apparatus space, for that and then some.
Okay.
Thank you, Matt. Bob?
I don't have a question on what they all asked.
But I because your speaker light wasn't on either.
Right.
I just assumed you had a question.
I don't. Which button do I hit? That one? Okay.
Oh, red one.
Red one. Top one. Okay. Can I speak now, Mr. Mayor?
You may speak whenever you wish.
I love technology. Chief, you sort of identified, a space here on this map south of Edgewood. I drive that area a lot, that area. Maybe Dignity Health will sell you the corner because the rest of them have houses, but I'm not really sure you've sort of selected something, or it's a tentative, not selected, tentative possibility.
The main reason we were looking at that site was that it's got the most likelihood of us being able to acquire it, we feel.
From Dignity?
Yeah.
Okay.
And beyond that, it is a little challenging in that area to find space, and there's some tenants further up the road we wouldn't want to.
I assumed that was, because first you said I saw Alameda and Edgewood, and I went, I didn't see those 4 corners. So I understand. Okay, that's all the only question I had.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. I just had a couple of questions. Stan, good presentation. Like Cameron, I'd like to see some numbers next time we go through this. I would also be interested in seeing whether there might be some value in trying to initiate some further discussions with the county, just because, as I recall the earlier discussions, there are synergies involved in consolidating 2 stations. There may be even more from consolidating 3. So that's an opportunity I'd like to not, just let pass by. I'd at least like to understand why they might not want to talk to us. And rumor has it that we may even have a pipeline into the county that we could use to find out why they are taking the position they are. That's one thing. The other comment I just want to make, and it's in part a question, when you talk about putting a second company in a new structure, how does one actually end up saving money when you basically are you have 2 companies you start with and you
bring them together?
All you're really doing is, I guess the building has to be roughly twice the size. So how do you actually save money?
So really what we're looking at in savings is how you staff those 2 companies.
Okay.
And like I was saying earlier, our vision is not to put 2 fire engines in that station as you know them today, the Type 1 fire engines that are in San Carlos currently. We wouldn't just put those 2 engine companies together. As you said, there's really no salary savings, which is the big chunk of where it comes from. So we were looking at alternative service delivery models. How do we staff that station? Do we run a single Type 1 fire engine and maybe a rescue squad out of there, which is staffed with less people? Different models of service delivery, which I know has been in the interest of San Carlos since the beginning, and appropriately so. And we've been actually making several presentations across the state on alternative service delivery. So we're looking at different ways of doing that.
Okay. And then I'll just make one other comment too, which is I think it's great to be looking outside the box about making something more than just a fire station. On the other hand, I want to raise a note of caution, which is that synergies and savings evaporate very quickly. So we have to make sure the value proposition is there for whatever we end up doing. But good next step. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, that takes care of item 8A. That brings us to item 8B, where we will receive a presentation outlining the preferred alternative for improvements in the Belmont Creek watershed and provide city staff with direction regarding the request by Novartis to have the city of San Carlos participate as a stakeholder in the project. Good evening, Jay.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. We have a couple of guests tonight that will be doing part of the presentation, so I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Martin Renner from Novartis. and Grant Wilcox from RECO, the consultant that did the Belmont Creek watershed study. And they're going to walk you through the first portion of the presentation, and then I will get back to you and then kind of lead discussion to get some input from council on this overall project. So at this point, I will turn to Martin and ask him to come up.
Thanks, Jay. Good evening, everyone. Do you see the slides actually on your... You do?
Actually, we do it by telepathy.
I see them too, but so it's a nice setup. Thanks for having us, and thanks for giving us the opportunity to talk tonight and get your buy-in on what we have done over the last 15 months and how we want to take it from here. So I'm pleased to see that you're interested and that Jay brought us to speak to you. We're doing the same for Belmont, the City Council meeting tomorrow, and we've met multiple times throughout that journey. I'm going to talk about it with different stakeholders, different parties that were interested in the creek, agencies, political stakeholders as well, and Mark and I have met, and I think Ron, we met at one of the meetings too. So let me introduce what we did, why we did this study from the beginning. Our facility is right next to the Belmont Creek, and we've been flooded for 3 consecutive years between 2010 and 2012. We had a lot of issues in getting back up into operations because we are a pharmaceutical business, and as soon as you get moisture into a plant, you have issues actually manufacturing it. So we are a manufacturing plant. We are manufacturing a drug that helps prevent infections for people that are suffering from cystic fibrosis, and quality of the product is crucial. So whenever you have wet walls, whenever you have moisture inside a facility, you can't run for multiple weeks. So we are facing downtimes, and patients will be suffering. That's one thing, and that's the main thing. We've also spent a lot of money recovering from this. So we've spent a lot of money in remediation. We've spent a lot of money in floodgates, protecting our site from being flooded. And we've spent some money in dredging last year. And when we did the dredging, we thought it doesn't make sense actually to dredge all the time. We should look for a solution that helps us prevent flooding moving forward overall. So come up with a solution so that we are not impacted at all. Overall, roughly what we spent over those 3 years was $2.5 million US. And then we decided to kick off a study for $250,000 with RECO as our consultants, to look at the whole creek from the mountains to the bay and what options we have along the creek to help prevention of flooding, not only for us, but for the whole neighborhood. We have a few pictures on here so that you see what flooding for us looks like. It's a very small creek, but as soon as it rains, it swells up, and even in a 2-year storm event, we were impacted. Our parking lot was impacted, our facility was impacted. That's what we did. It's actually impacted from all sides. So here are a few pictures from all sides. You can see that on the northwest side, where we have the quarry, it's just going like a waterfall across the flood barrier. We have pictures of the street right below, which is Quarry Road. That's what it looked like in 2010. And then we have a picture up right top of the lot entrance, which is Industrial Road. You can see the creek on the left side in the corner, but then the main road is Industrial Road. So if you see a road like this, we did some modeling, and we also checked with a few of the neighbors. The first piece of property that would be impacted is PG&E, together with the trailer site right next to 101. We had owners that we talked to before, and they are all excited about our study and would be supportive. Unfortunately, the president of the Harbor Industrial Association who wanted to join today, Mark Lockenmeyer, he might still be joining because we're a bit early, but might not. The picture at the bottom right, front of the facility, is from where you have the luxury car dealer right now. So we haven't talked yet, but I'm pretty sure he would be excited about any of those studies too. What we did last year in September was we dredged the creek, and it's a process that requires a lot of agency buy-in. So we talked to the water board a lot about us dredging, but then also doing that study. And you can see that from before dredging, it was about a 4 feet wide culvert under industrial. We then dredged to slightly over 7 feet depth. We had last winter, we had only 2 storm events. And the storm event 1st of April, you can see the picture how close it got to industrial. And right afterwards, when it went away again, we only had about 2 feet gap to the culvert. Reason for that is if we keep dredging, but downstream no dredging happens, the creek slows down and all the sediment settles right in front of the culvert. So that's what we saw here, lots of coarse gravel, and basically the dredging effort still leads to an improved bed, so we have more capacity in the creek, but not really a lot of downflow down the stream. We explored different alternatives from mountains to the bay and came up with 9 alternatives at one point in time what we could do from all the way upstream, Waterdog Lake modification, to downstream tide gates at Oracle Bridge, which was the furthest downstream. We then developed, or RECO for us developed a model that could show what the impact would be on flood. And unfortunately, what it resulted in, first step was we voted with different stakeholders, including people from the city of San Carlos, on which alternatives to model out. And in parallel, the model was developed. Then we had a model, and we checked out what the impact of each alternative would be on flooding of our facility, but also of the other facilities. And unfortunately, none of the originally planned for alternatives really worked. But one that we played with then was alternative 6, which is a parallel overflow pipe all the way down Harbor Boulevard. So it would start Old County and would go right into the slough. The other alternatives could add to it, and especially the Twin Pines Park solution in Belmont would actually help because it would create a basin for settlement of sediment, but wouldn't really help us with the flooding. So this is what the preferred alternative would look like. In green, our modification. At the moment, the current creek flow is in blue. So Belmont Creek goes down in a very straight line all the way parallel to Quarry Road, or between Quarry and Harbor. And it's a non-natural flow. So that's why it also is difficult to maintain, to keep the creek in its current bed. The green pipe would be a parallel overflow pipe that would go all the way under Harbor Boulevard, right under 101 and into the slough. And the proposal, it would be slightly higher than the current creek, so the current natural flow would be maintained, but in case of a storm event, it would overflow into that pipe. We looked at we looked at what it would look like on Harbor, and it's a 10 by 6 box culvert that would go under one lane of Harbor Boulevard. We would propose also permeable pavers and like some green spots along the boulevard to make it more efficient. And there's a proposal for sediment traps within that culvert so that maintenance would be easier. It's not fully developed. It's an idea at the moment. I would say it's at a conceptual stage from an engineering point of view, but it is the only idea in our model that actually worked. We would have to relocate some of the utilities. So we looked at utilities, which was also an input from the county. So it is on county property. So all this is County of San Mateo, and we had a few people from the county being involved in all the discussions. The relocation was added later on. We assume that the total cost would be about $16 million US, with about $2 million of that being spent in Twin Pines Park and $14 million on Harbor Boulevard. We are proposing to still combine it with Twin Pines Park because of the sediment capture, but also because we are creating a natural flow of the creeks through Belmont Park, through Twin Pines Park in Belmont. And it would help from permitting perspective. So Water Board and Fish and Wildlife would like the combination. It would be very difficult to get permits just for harbor, but in this combination, we have a mitigation measure right there together with this alternative. The alternative could be big enough, so it could also serve for other projects as a mitigation measure. So we are hoping that helps from a funding perspective. The main benefits are that it would reduce significantly the flood risk for a 10-year storm event. Challenge we got in the last meeting with different cities, stakeholders, Senator's office and Congresswoman's office as well, was that why didn't we look at larger storm events? It was, at the beginning, we just kicked it off because we said we need to start with something realistic. But once the project is going, was the recommendation to look at a 25-year storm event as well. It would also, with limiting the storm impacts of the flood, it would also limit the costs that are associated to that. And by limiting overflow into parking lots, streets, and so on, we would improve significantly water quality in the bay. Less sediment is a side effect by doing Twin Pines Park in parallel, and that's why we think even from a flood protection perspective, avoiding dredging every year would be a key benefit. In Twin Pines Park, just for your information as well, and that's the main discussion with Belmont tomorrow, there is a plan what it could look like. There's a high-level plan how the creek would meander through the park versus being in a channel and a canyon right now, and there would be some modifications needed from a channel perspective, but also from an overall park perspective, which Belmont is supportive of. The additional benefit is it could serve as an educational park, apart from it being more, nicer from a recreation perspective. We could say for educational benefits how natural flows look like, and it could also create a habitat for local species. What we'd like to clarify is how we take it from here, because the study is more or less done. We have a preferred alternative. We have many of the stakeholders and agencies actually buy into this. They've been part of this study from the beginning, so Waterboard was very supportive. Army Corps of Engineers was supportive. BCDC was a group of people that are very excited about us doing a watershed study. And then all the cities, Redwood City, San Carlos, Belmont, the county were part of this moving forward. Caltrans as well moving forward. And we'd like to understand how we could pick it up from here. Who would drive it to completion, to execution first? What would be the decision-making structure? And whether you, as the City Council of San Carlos, would be supportive of this project moving to execution phase. That's basically it. Any questions?
Thank you, Martin.
Thanks, Mark.
Any questions for Martin?
I have a couple questions.
Cameron.
Thanks for the very helpful presentation. Does Novartis own the building?
No, we're leasing the building.
And how long has Novartis been in the facility?
We have been in the facility since 1990. It was the predecessor company. We took over in 2009.
And can you talk about how long you think you're likely to be in this building? Is there a long-term market for the drug? Do you see yourselves as a long-term part of the community?
Yes. Well, if everything works out fine and if there's no bigger impact, I think so. Yes. This is the only place worldwide where we can currently manufacture the product.
And why is that?
Because it's special to make. It's a high-tech product, so manufacturing is very unusual in this area, I know, but it's a high-tech product. It's a special designed powder for inhalation purposes. We can't manufacture anywhere else in the world. We have a lot of facilities around the world, so there is potential that it could be transferred, but at the moment we are growing here. We have hired a lot of people over the last 18 months. We've grown significantly. We've invested a lot of money into the facility as well. We have a lease, opt-in lease until 2027. And the product is hard to make for anyone else too. So, we have a long-term market for the product. Whether the company decides at one point in time to transfer, I can't tell, but at the moment it's not planned.
Okay. And it seems to me like a very worthy project. I think the key question for the city is what kind of financial contribution do you think you're looking for from the city, and is that known, and what's the relative funding mix for a $16 million capital project?
Well, at the moment, the main request is not on funding. Mm-hmm. At the moment, the main request is for somebody to pick it up from here, an owner to drive it to the next phase. So we need detailed engineering now. Mm-hmm. We need to work on agencies and start the permitting process for execution. Mm-hmm. And the main request is for somebody to pick it up from
so you're
here.
Looking for staff time from the city, essentially.
We're looking for resources. And political resources. Basically.
And Jeff or Jay, can you guys comment on what kind of resources you think would be necessary from the staff side?
Mr. Mayor and Councilmember Johnson, especially at this point in time, I would say let me defer that because I have a couple slides that I wanted to share with the council. If there are other questions for Dr. Renner, then that would be, at this point, probably appropriate. But I do have a couple of other things I want to get to, and I'll address that issue when I get there.
That's fine. All right, that's all my questions for now.
Other questions for Martin? I had one quick one. What's your sense of what the impact on the preferred alternative would be of looking at bigger storms? You explained how you chose to model 10-year storms. Do we know enough to know if we were to shift to 25 or 50-year storms, do we say, oh, we need a different solution?
I'll defer to Grant.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Mayor and Councilman. The problem is it's a very complicated system, and so right now the choke point is this narrow, straight point right there between Old Canyon Road and Industrial, where they, in the late 60s, they engineered it, channelized it. That used to be part of the bay. They filled it in, built 101. So that part of the creek right now is the narrowest part of the creek, and that's what's causing the flooding. Once you fix that, then you're sort of moving the flooding to other parts. So once you fix this, then it's a matter of a bigger storm may require a tide gate or something else. But right now, a tide gate wouldn't work because of this narrow constriction and choke point. Does that make sense? It's a very intricate puzzle, and it's never been tackled before because you're dealing with 6 different entities that control this creek, and everyone's sort of been afraid to touch any part of it, not knowing the repercussions of what happens to the next part.
Thank you. Jay, when you're one other thought that occurs to me, but you may be touching on this, it looked to me from the map that Martin had put up there that while the benefit would actually be realized by the properties that are adjacent to the creek channel, the proposed project is actually in county land, correct?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. It would seem to me the county would be the obvious political organization to spearhead this then, but that's just me. Who's next on the presentation?
Mr. Mayor, if there's no other questions for Dr. Renner, then I have just a couple of brief slides. And
I don't think there were any other questions. Didn't see any indication. Nope.
So, Mr. Mayor, if I might, let me put this issue into a little bit of a context for the city from a stormwater perspective. This is an issue that we first met with Novartis in late 2012. Having become aware of the tremendous impact on their property from the flooding that had occurred in the previous couple of years. And these issues were identified and expressed a very, very significant interest in being able to see if something could be done in this particular area. And I have to give credit to Novartis because they did go ahead and hire a consultant to plan for the dredging, get the permits that were necessary for the creek adjacent to the property, as well as investing in their properties from a flood protection standpoint, and also for the watershed study, an investment in the watershed study. And I will say that for a private company, that is a pretty remarkable thing that they would be willing to step up and do that. So I believe a lot of the legwork has been done by Novartis, and that's important in a situation like this. As the council will remember, in 2013, we hired a consultant to do the industrial road drainage study. And as a result of that study, which we presented to council, it certainly focused on flooding on the east side of the city, the area essentially east of Old County Road and the railroad tracks, as all of the drainages go to the bay, we have lots of localized flooding. And a lot of that is, there's tidal influences there, but there is also a tremendous buildup of silt in the channels that outlet eventually to the bay. And so one of the things that our consultant recommended at the time, and then the council, we brought to the council as part of the budget process, was a real improvement on silt removal in those areas to help maximize capacity. So the point made by Dr. Renner earlier about the dredging at the property, Novartis, having little effect unless the dredging is continued all the way to the outlet point to the bay, is exactly right on. There's little extra room for all the silt that comes down out of the hills that settles into these creek channels at these points where it flattens out and the velocity of the water drops, and so does all the material. So that was the reason why our consultant and we agreed that the silt removal focus was a very important thing for us to try to do. In the consultant study for us, the Belmont Creek dredging was a high priority. And it wasn't just along Novartis, but it was clear up from Old County Road all the way down through underneath Industrial Road and to the freeway. And they knew that it had to go under the freeway as well. He talks about Caltrans. They are engaged in this process. They have been at the stakeholder meetings, and it's encouraging to see that because they kind of are the big block that we have to get through as we go east towards the bay. The 101 Holly East Channel dredging project was also identified as a high priority, and that's the one that we're currently working on with the Army Corps trying to get a permit for. And again, the whole idea is if we can clear the channels downstream, we can at least maximize the capacity of those channels. It doesn't mean they won't refill. Until more projects like what Dr. Renner has described up at Twin Pines Park are done, where there is sort of offline opportunity for water to pond and some of the silt to settle out before that water then proceeds downstream, we'll always have the impact of silt at the downstream ends. So that's one of the reasons why that Twin Pines Park project as a mitigation measure is a valuable piece of what would be done here, a valuable part of the whole that would be done. In the 2014-16 CIP, we asked and council approved $1.2 million over the 2 years for storm drain maintenance and $1.76 million for silt removal in the industrial area as per the consultant's recommendations. So council is focusing on this aspect of work in our city, and I think it dovetails nicely into what's happening along Belmont Creek, although this is a much smaller scale project than what has been proposed. So for council tonight, since city staff in San Carlos has a lot of projects on the plate, one of the things we want to find out from you as it was related to the idea that do you want us to participate in this this multi-agency effort to secure the funding permits and eventually lead to construction of this Belmont Creek project? And what I think the council should also give us some direction on is whether they think city staff should take a lead role in this. I have indicated to the project team that I felt like this was a worthwhile project. There's tremendous benefit to San Carlos in the construction of this project. And so if the council desires, that would be something which I think we could prioritize and move forward with. But it is absolutely a multi-agency effort. So again, from the council's perspective, I'd appreciate your take on what you think this, in terms of its priority overall and its importance to San Carlos. And if you want us to, then what I would propose is that we would be bringing back this information that would have many of the particulars that would need to be asked and presented to the council as far as the type of agreement we might use with multi-agencies, the costs that would be involved in this, the cost of the project, eventually some sort of cost sharing if it was going to be necessary, the grant sources that would need to be pursued in order for us to be able to find all the money that's necessary. In my mind, that's the most important piece ultimately, is finding the source of money that would pay for this, because I don't believe that between the county and Belmont and San Carlos, we would be able to come up with the money that's needed in what I consider to be the regular course of business as it relates to the city's CIP and the amount of money that we have available. So that's kind of the context I wanted to put it into you for us in the city, and we'd take any input and feedback you have at this point in time. And certainly for Dr. Renner and his consultant, if there's technical questions, they can answer as well.
Thank you, Jay. Questions from the dais? And we'll get into providing guidance, our views on guidance during discussion phase. But Ron.
Thank you, Mark. Couple questions for you, Jay. It sounds like, well, one of my questions was going to be who would be the lead agency or the project manager in this, but I get the feeling from you that San Carlos wouldn't mind being the lead agency. Did I understand that correctly?
That's correct. I think this is a project that has significant benefit for San Carlos. And so I believe that that would be staff time well spent and consultant energy well spent to be able to lead this project forward.
All right. And so if that's the case, then how does that affect, or does that positively affect our share of the cost? In other words, if we're going to be spending all this staff time and putting in all these resources, would that also have an impact at the other end in terms of what our contribution would be financially, since we would be pretty much doing all the heavy lifting?
I think that would be something we would want to leverage as part of the agreement with the other agencies, because I believe we can't just simply decide to do this and sort of hope the others will come along with it. I think we have to have a very positive commitment from the county and from Belmont to do this project along with San Carlos.
Right.
So at this point in time, again, part of that is negotiation, and I think by taking the lead, that may give us a little bit of leverage from a positive standpoint.
So Mark had mentioned that most of this land, at least on the Belmont Creek, is county land, correct? Where is the county in all this? What sort of input or feedback or participation have they demonstrated?
I think the county is sort of like many of the other stakeholders right now. Seeing the project as it's proposed, the alternative that's come up as the preferred alternative, and seeing that it is actually constructed in county, essentially county area, that section of Harbor Boulevard. I think they see the benefit, but I think they also see the reality of it's going to be a very arduous process. It's not going to be a cheap process, but it is one that would be worth doing. But I have not sensed a strong feeling from them that, yep, absolutely, we'll jump right to the front on this and lead the effort.
So it sounds like they may not even have the resources that cities like Belmont, San Carlos have.
No, I wouldn't agree with that. I think it becomes a matter of priority.
All right.
And so if the board is convinced that this is a high enough priority, then they can give direction to their public works director for allocating resources if they want them to take the lead on this.
Okay. And I think the last question I had was, it sounds like silt never goes away. As soon as you clear it out, it just reoccurs. So whatever project that would be completed would have some sort of silt management aspect of it so that it's regularly removed. Is that right?
Well, it has a component of the project, at least that's being considered, that would minimize the transport of silt downstream through the channel sections that are much steeper. And the area from the study that I had linked to the staff report, when you look back through there, you can see many, many sections of the channel in Belmont in the upstream area that are deeply incised, which means they're cut from the water that's rushing down through at a velocity that erodes the soil with it, takes it downstream. And then only when it slows down does that silt settle out. So if you can eliminate that erosiveness in a way that sediment doesn't transport further down, you can at least make it a smaller amount that you have to maintain. Then I think it's reasonable to have a regular maintenance agreement like we have right now with the Corps for small sediment removal in our creeks that are in kind of the eastern end of the city.
All right. I think that answers all my questions for the moment.
Okay. Bob.
Jay, the budget, that was what you just mentioned about items in the budget. We have this money for storm drain maintenance and money for silt removal. Those two numbers at the bottom. Do any of these monies impact that creek?
At this point in time, there's about 310,000 that we had earmarked for silt removal in Belmont Creek. And that's part of the 1.76 million.
So we will this winter, or we will sometime in the next 2 years, go in there and, like those gentlemen I saw pictures of, get in there and clean it out?
That's right. We're pursuing a permit to do that right now.
Okay, and we feel we'll get a permit in 60, 90, 120, 80, sometime in the next 6 months, year?
Yes.
Pick a number, right? Okay. But would it be good? Like you said, it would be great to have them, like, okay, we want to, I mean, again, I have no idea why it takes all this time, but it seems like you make a phone call and go, we got to move this, and somebody would say, yeah, that's a good idea, go. But obviously that's not the case. But can you have an annual, every time you want to do it, you got to go back and ask? Can't you do, like you mentioned, a maintenance type thing or something? They don't give you permits like that you can just maintain the creek?
We're in a little bit of a quandary right now. And the reason I say that is that we currently have a document that's called a stream bed alteration agreement, and it was through the California State Department of Fish and Wildlife. It lists all the creeks that are in this eastern area of the city by specific location that says we can get in and we can do minor maintenance work, that is dredging of soil, that is in these creeks, as long as we give them notice, and we keep it to a certain amount per year.
Okay.
But yet we've been told now, as we've asked to go in and do the Holly 101 East channel, that by the Army Corps, that we have to have biological studies that go with it, and we've also been asked to do by it's the State Water Board, that we have to have a permit through the Army Corps before they will grant the permit that we need. So we're sort of stuck in this because we thought we had permission to do it, but yet we're being held back and told, no, you need to do more.
And it sounds like that every time you go ask, they're going to set up it's like a catch-22. Here's another rule that you have to do, or some other hoop you have to jump through. So let's assume that we took the leadership role, which you're sort of implying that you wouldn't have a problem doing. Don't we have to have, but we have to have everybody sign on to this, right? I mean, we have to have Belmont sign on, we have to have the county sign on. I guess those are the two main other players.
Yes, essentially that's true.
If one of those decides, never mind, then we're SOL, we can't do anything, or?
Well, at this point, I don't want to say for sure that that's the case, but I would emphasize that all the agencies need to be prepared to go forward with this and have that equal commitment. I can't say that I know what I'd do if one of them finally said, no, this is not a high priority for us to move forward.
Okay. But it sounds like we certainly would like to have all three.
Yes.
And then again, you indicated, I think there's no dollars amounts on any real of that. Let's just say it was $16 million. We really don't have any idea, or we haven't sat down at a table and said, okay, you get 20%, you get 10%, you get 40%, or something like that. That's still all to be determined.
That's correct. And there's also the subject of whether or not parcel assessments or some sort of a district should be formed for the properties that benefit from this project. And again, we're just at the beginning of this. I think there's many aspects of it that still have to be explored.
I guess my last question would be, let's assume that in the next month you could get the county board to say, we're good, get us to say we're good, to sit down at a table. Belmont, we're good, we want to sit down and talk about it. What do you anticipate, and again, maybe this is way too open-ended, the time frame would be for this? Because it would seem like it would be fairly long, but I don't know.
It would be very long. And just sort of giving you an idea, let's just say we had everybody agreed and we had the essentially the scope of the work that we wanted to do. One of the first things we'd have to do is we'd have to begin preparation of the environmental document that's required for this, because it's definitely something that would impact creek environment, and it would have there would be lots of conditions and other kinds of things that would go along with it. My own sense is probably that's at least a 1.5-year process. I think construction is probably a little more straightforward, especially in the area along Harbor Boulevard. But the complication there is that there are a number of utilities in Harbor Boulevard that have to be essentially relocated or rerouted in such a way that the culverts would be able to be placed there. So it's complex from that standpoint, and so you would have to make sure all those things got done. It's probably at least a year's worth of construction activity. So I guess conservatively, I'd say probably we'd be start to finish, it'd be at least 3.5 years.
And having said that, if we don't start, nothing ever gets done. But in the interim, now there's 3 years of winters. We may have another winter someday. And if we have one, then what do we do? I mean, we're sort of in the same, to Dr. Renner, I realize everybody understands this, but hopefully then there's some mitigation of some sort, or we keep going back to the state folks or the fishing or the U.S. Fish and Wildlife or whoever we have to go to, keep getting these temporary permits, I guess, to try to clean out what we can clean out or do what we can do, I guess. Is that the alternative? Or not the alternative, but what we would do if we started, in other words, be running concurrently with this project?
Yes, and that's my intent from the standpoint of the city and what the council has already committed for the sediment removal and storm drain projects. We have a focus on this east end, and so as soon as I can get the permits, I'll do the dredging in the downstream areas, and we'll at least create the capacity for an interim period of time. So that's probably the best we can do for now while that larger project came along.
I have one more question, Mr. Mayor. Are the other entities have they done anything about this at all? Have they physically gone in and dredged or moved, or is there anything they could do in the interim, that 3 years, that would help besides us cleaning out that I saw the pictures of?
If I remember right, the area that's kind of upstream where it comes in underneath the railroad berm and then comes around Old County Road and then down Belmont Creek, if I remember right, the county and Belmont had done some work there, which has helped that channel a little bit vegetation-wise and some removal of some material. But beyond that, I'm really not sure what else has been done.
I mean, while we have this council of three, or this group of people sitting at a table, we might be able to work out maybe some other, I'm sure you're way ahead of me on this, some other things that other folks could be doing while we're doing this, cleaning out of the silt or getting this. They could be doing some other stuff, maybe, and it's not going to be perfect, but it would be assistance to try to maybe get it from both ends or whatever to try to work it through.
I think that would be one of the first things we started talking about when we put our group together of the agencies, and we have clear intent on what we're trying to accomplish between now and the time if the project gets done.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Walter. Bob.
Matt. Thank you. You've mentioned about we've talked about interest of other agencies. And I'm just curious if anybody has talked directly with Mr. Horsley, the supervisor that represents our interest, if you will. And in part, I ask that because I know he's had experience with a similar type of situation in Pescadero with Pescadero Creek, and also with over in Pacifica with the creek that runs through there. They've had some issues, and I think the county got involved in that at one time.
And I'll let Dr. Renner correct me if I'm wrong, but he has been actively involved in the process so far and attended the meeting that we had.
From his staff, and yeah.
Correct.
Very good. So that what we're seeing there is interest. It's on the radar screen of the county.
Yes.
Yeah. Good. Is there any consideration moving forward to involve a coordinator, to do an RFP for a coordinator? For instance, I know Palo Alto and I think Menlo Park and the county worked on San Francisco. Yeah,
yes.
I can't say it, but the creek down there. And actually, the fellow that ran that project, I don't know where the project stands exactly, but of interest, the fellow that managed that project and ran it is Len Matterman, who's a resident of San Carlos, and he runs a company that does this kind of thing. So I'm just wondering if it seems what made the project work there was Mr. Matterman and the fact that he was there on board, being paid for by all entities to manage and negotiate with the feds on, you got both state and fed to get through, and he helped them get through all that.
And we're still too early in the process to have determined that, but it was mentioned. Certainly the county is involved in a couple of other sort of creek areas that have multi-jurisdictional issues and concerns, because our creeks just seem to be the borderline between cities in our area. So definitely a viable idea.
Okay. Well, and just to segue on your comment right there, even with this creek, it's not exactly on our border, is it? But
it is.
It is on our border, but nonetheless, you have to look at the watershed area of it, and it's coming down out of the canyons off of Club Drive and so forth, right? You're getting fed by that.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Cameron, did you have any questions?
No.
Okay. Yeah, I had a few. It seems to me, Jay, that one of the underlying challenges of however we move forward on this is in order for this to work, we actually have to get a number of different agencies who all face different value propositions in this, sort of cost versus value, to undertake certain responsibilities. I mean, for example, Belmont modifying Twin Pines Park to recreate a bit more of a floodplain situation. And I presume actually there'll probably be some maintenance associated with that. As there are floods, the silt will deposit there and that'll have to get cleaned up. County, I'm not exactly sure what that is. For us, it's pretty clear that there'll still be some dredging that needs to get done periodically. Redwood City, Redwood Shores, I know we didn't really touch on it, but the downstream stuff is going to be an issue with the water discharges, I think, right? There has to be work there. So is that a reasonable perspective on this, that there's all these individual parts that need to work together and need to be done diligently for this whole thing to work?
Yes, and then you can add one more piece, and that would be Caltrans, because the culverts under 101 are an important part of the project as well.
And those will have to be maintained also.
That's right.
They'll have to be maintained also. That's sort of a lead into the challenge that I see here is I was making some notes about trying to understand what the benefit of solving the problem is for the various agencies. For us, it's very clear. Okay, we have a significant business. We have a number of significant businesses that get damaged every time there's a big storm event. But for example, when I was thinking about from Belmont's perspective, I suppose the biggest issue for them is they might, avoid having their land end up in the bay. I mean, it's an erosion issue. Okay, the county, there is some negative impact on businesses because the other side, the north side of the creek, is county land. So there are businesses there that are in county jurisdiction who get damaged when there are floods. Although I remember when I visited the Novartis site, Martin had pointed out that the flood wall on the county side of the creek is higher than on the San Carlos side. So differentially, the water tends to come over to us rather than the county. So you can probably see where I'm going with this. The benefits of the project working successfully fall mostly for us, mostly in San Carlos. The costs, like I said before, I mean, it's the impact in terms of doing the project is on county land. So you have sort of a mismatch of cost and benefit. And those are always very tricky things to manage. And contrary to what I said a few minutes ago when at the end of Martin's presentation, there actually is an argument that says, no, the people who benefit the most from this, the agency that benefits the most from this, ought to take the lead on it because they're the ones who have the most at stake. Okay, I'm oversimplifying here, but if Belmont has more of its land eroding down into the bay, that's probably not as big a deal as having a business get put offline for 3 weeks, a multinational business get put offline. So that's a source of concern to me, is how we're going to balance all that and how we're going to be able to have some mechanism to enforce continued diligence of fulfilling the duties and responsibilities to make the whole system work. I'd be interested in your thoughts on this. I mean, are you familiar with structures like this that work elsewhere, multi-agency structures that work?
Yeah, actually, yes, Mr. Mayor, I am. A multi-agency agreement, if it's something, it's not really like a JPA, but it's essentially it's a binding agreement between the agencies that outlines the responsibilities of each party going forward, which are financial as well as, say, for for components of the project or the ongoing maintenance or something like that, they have been struck and have been kind of held up as, you know, the agency puts in their budget the money that's needed for the share of the project or the maintenance ongoing and the effort in that way. And then essentially you move forward with those commitments being honored by those agencies. So I see that as something that we absolutely would have to have in this situation in order to make sure that we were going to get the ongoing commitment to this. So I see that as, you know, ultimately the resolutions from each of the governing boards to make these commitments. Of course, in the end, those same boards have the opportunity, if they chose, to discontinue their role. But I think we'd want to try to set it up so that it would be the importance would be demonstrated, that the commitment would stay there. And I think the San Francisquito Creek example that Councilman Grocott mentioned is one which, as I understand it, they've created an ongoing arrangement between these agencies to have that interest continue to be maintained. That is, there's enough of a common interest at different places and along that entire creek that those agencies need to stay together on that and continue to provide the service that's part of it. I believe there's separate districts that have been created there, and that may be a mechanism that we can explore as well.
Although there may be some lessons from there as well. I seem to recall there was a fair amount of bickering that goes on occasion there. That may be inevitable in this kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I had another question for staff, which is this, and this is maybe getting the cart before the horse a little bit, is there any opportunity to use some kind of improvement district? Or I know the state just recently authorized, I think of it as sort of the son of RDA, although it's nowhere near as sophisticated as RDA, improvement district type structure for financing things. I wonder whether there's any applicability of some structure like that to funding something like this.
I guess I'll ask our city attorney if he knows of that more particularly. I'm not aware of it at this point.
You know what I'm talking about, right, Jeff?
I'm familiar with what you're talking about, but not to the level of detail to be able to answer the question as if it is applicable or not. But to answer your big question, we will be exploring all the potential funding sources, from assessment districts to other tools that are available through the state, grant opportunities, those kinds of things.
Okay. And then my last question, actually, Martin, is for you, and it was touched on earlier, is trying to protect all of the businesses in San Carlos that get damaged by these flood events is a concern of mine. But to be fair, I think the negative impacts on Novartis's business weigh very heavily in my mind in looking at this. And so, to me, another part of the arrangement of this going forward is not only the commitment over the long term of the agencies involved to deliver, but basically, I have no idea what form it would take, some form of commitment from Novartis that to be blunt, that it's worth the while for all the agencies to do this. And I'd just be interested if you have any commentary on, I know you know.
We have a huge interest. I mean, that's why we ran that study initially. It's not because we have a short-term interest, but because we have a long-term interest of solving the flooding issue, and it's the same issue for many others. They just didn't suffer enough, maybe, to pick up money to actually run a study like this. But I'm sure there's going to be many other businesses that will be interested in continuation of this and joining our efforts. And Novartis for sure has an interest, and we'll be part of the group that will look into this long term.
And I'm using
the word. I don't know if you were looking at financial.
Well, in not so much financial. I was more. To paint a silly picture, if we were to launch this kind of effort and a year from now, presumably at a higher level within Novartis than you as the local executive head, said, you know what, for strategic reasons, it makes more sense to relocate this to Basel. Okay. I would want
headquarters is for those who don't know.
I would like there to be some kind of, because there would have been public agency commitments made at that point, there needs to be some kind of contractual offset to that. I mean, we can't bind Novartis for how it's going to run its business, but if we're going to make significant expenditures of time, effort, and money on its behalf, in large part, there has to be some balance there. Because we're doing it.
I understand, fully understand.
Okay. And you think that's something we might be able to do?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
I can't commit today, but I think it makes sense.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, so any public comments? Does anybody wish to address the council on this topic? Okay, seeing none. We don't actually have, I don't believe we have any kind of resolution or anything here, so we're basically giving direction to staff. Excuse me. Cameron, I see you have a request to speak.
Well, I mean, if we were going to move to the discussion portion, I had some things.
Anticipating that.
Yes.
Okay. Well, oddly enough, we are moving to the discussion portion, so feel free to start.
I was accurate in my prediction. I just want to make the argument that this is something that we should absolutely have the staff work on and take the lead. I was on the Economic Development Commission in 2012, which is, I think, when this first surfaced, and it was part of this program where we had these ambassador teams go out and meet with the largest employers in San Carlos with the idea of saying, what can we, if anything, do for you? Because we want to keep great employers in the city. We could almost find nothing really to do for any of our large employers, but this was the most significant one that came back, where we had a very important, significant business in our community who had a significant infrastructure issue. And I think that we, in general, at a high level, need to show that we care about, the major employers in our community, and if there are things that we can do to help fix problems, then we should do them. I think, obviously, we don't have $16 million laying around, and I don't know what it's going to come to. But I think in the short term, we have specific expertise and can play an important role in helping to organize, sort of multi-agency political project, and I think that's something that we're good at. We're good at. It's the least that we can do to help solve this problem. And so, as we move down the road, it's not clear that all the agencies are going to want to participate. It's not clear that all the funding's going to be there. But I think we should definitely give it a good try.
Other comments, Bob?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I concur with Councilmember Johnson, and I think Mr. Walter indicated that he wouldn't mind having San Carlos be the lead group, and I think we have a lot, as Mr. Johnson said, a lot of expertise in this area, and I think we should give direction to staff to proceed with this.
Matt?
Number one, I just wanted to thank Novartis for coming and presenting, and I give them a lot of big compliment for getting this started, because this is something that we've looked at before with our other creeks that go through town. I remember bringing this up some time ago regarding creeks to the south that go through San Carlos that we share with Redwood City and the county. And it's really tough to get anybody to move. So you guys are to be commended for taking the lead the way that you have and gone to the expense that you have as a private company. I almost would say shame on us for not doing it first, but there it is. You guys have done it. I very definitely think we should move forward on it. It could also be an example for, like I said, the southern creeks that are going to need the same, to be addressed in a similar fashion. And just strategically, I think the way to go about this, I would think, this is just me, personally, is working it out with Belmont that we could co-lead on it, so that, if two cities go to the county, it's a lot better than one city going to the county. And I think the counties, just my estimation of it, despite the fact that, like I said, Horsley's worked on this kind of thing before, I think they're going to be the last one to come to the table. So it's going to have to be the two of us, being Belmont and San Carlos.
I agree with that. Oh, sorry, Ron.
I did have one more thing I wanted to point out. I am in support of us of moving forward, giving direction to staff to pursue taking the lead. I like the idea of us taking the lead, and I think we can control the process a little bit more. Certainly, we would welcome Belmont's participation, but since Jay has indicated that that's something that you guys would really like to take the lead on, that's enough for me. I'm in support of it.
Thank you, Ron. I pretty much agree with the sentiments that have been expressed by my colleagues, but I do want to sound one slightly different note. To me, the most important thing that comes out of all this is that the problem gets solved, okay? And whether we are the lead of that, or Belmont's the lead of that, or the county's the lead of that, or some mishmash of independent group that we hire is the lead of that, or Caltrans is the lead of that, that's actually a secondary issue to me. The important thing is solve the problem. Now, they're related because solving the problem requires leadership, and you can't just have 4 or 5 different agencies try and make this happen independently. So I definitely support San Carlos staff pitching in on this and offering to provide the leadership and focus, because we do get most of the benefit from it. But, if we end up having to be the power behind the throne, so to speak, I'm happy with that too. It works very well in a lot of families, works great in mine. I do what I'm told, and I don't even know that I'm doing what I'm told. Jay, I look forward, however, to you becoming the Caesar of Silt.
What a nickname.
All right. With that, thank you all.
Thank you, gentlemen, for coming.
And again, I'd like to also echo Matt's comments, I think on behalf of all of us, that the proactive nature of Novartis in this. I mean, clearly you were most at risk of this, but the fact that you took it upon yourself to do this in a constructive fashion rather than simply screaming to high heaven that somebody someplace needed to do something, I think is wonderful. I think it's a great sign of being able to work together on this, and I really appreciate it. Well, we like to hear that too. We like to hear that too.
Thank you, Dr. Renner.
Thank you. All right, that finishes 8B. I am going to make a slight tweak to the agenda, if my colleagues don't mind this, and that is to take up 9C, which is the remodeling project for the Adult Community Center, out of order, and we'll do that as the first item of new business. Anybody have any objection to that? Okay. Dr. Boland, I think that means you're up.
Play. I just want to mention two housekeeping items. The 5th annual Goblin Walk is this Friday at 4 o'clock, so consider yourself duly invited. And also, we just received late word of the Crestview Park opening, ribbon cutting, November 22nd at 10 a.m. We'll look forward to having the big scissors there with you. So this evening, again, Christine Boland, Parks and Recreation Director. This evening, we're requesting what constitutes a simple amendment to a professional services agreement with Ross Drulis Kusenberry in the amount of $136,429 to provide additional design services not originally anticipated in the Adult Community Center remodel project. Over the past 2 months, we've conducted 3 very fun and passionate focus meetings at the Adult Center. We listened intently to, with our consultant, to the participants' wants, needs, desires, and their wish list. And our architect took that back to the drawing room, so to speak, and took those wants and needs into the design. And tonight we have some conceptual drawings for you to look at and consider. Before I call up our consultant, who's been very patient sitting here in the audience, I'd like to acknowledge a very generous donation by the Friends of the Adult Community Center, and we have the president in the audience this evening. They have pledged $30,000 towards the project, and in your written materials, there's also a bequest in the amount of $40,000. So we have a very nice amount to kick off with, in addition to the budgeted amounts for the project. So with that, I'd like to invite Michael Ross up for the presentation.
Good evening, Michael.
Good evening, and thank you, Christine. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, it's a pleasure to be here. And I'd also like to acknowledge the input of the San Carlos community members who attended the 3 focus group meetings, and it was very valuable. And from this process, we learned a number of things. One is that the ACC program is popular, it's well-loved, and is an important part of many San Carlos community centers, members' lives. And another thing we learned is how we age in America is changing. The modern way of aging emphasizes keeping physically and mentally active and maintaining and building social connections. And another thing that we learned is that the existing building is actually a very valuable community asset. But it's while it's substantially in good condition, it's going to benefit from a critical repair and renovation program, code corrections, mechanical system replacement, and other improvements. And these improvements are going to be described tonight in design option 1. But prior to doing so, I'd like to discuss some of the context. Going back the other direction. Which? Thank you. Okay, so the ACC, which is in the upper left-hand quadrant of this aerial photo, is actually part of an ensemble of community-serving buildings. And this relationship is important because some of the services that were originally provided in the ACC, like the library and computer lab, are actually better provided for in the new library. And so what this allows us to do is actually repurpose some of the spaces within the building for programs that are more consistent with the ACC's vision for the future and for the input that we received from the community members. And we'll discuss these sorts of changes in option 2. And the other aspect of the building is the importance of the space that surrounds it, and that it's actually part of the Civic Center proper, and that there's a number of ways to access the Adult Community Center, and these dotted lines on the aerial indicate paths of travel. Well, there is a path of travel that is basically inaccessible and we're being asked to make it accessible, and that is connecting the exterior outdoor spaces of the community center to the forecourt of City Hall. And so there was a request for a ramp connection and improvements to the exterior, and we will discuss those in option 3. Of the 3 options, option 1 is basically 100% repairs, which we originally commissioned for. What you see at the bottom of the screen is a cost line. And as I describe the repairs or code corrections in option 1, you will start to see that the cost line fills up with how those repairs may impact the construction budget. The cost line on the bottom is representative of construction costs, not overall budget costs. The cost line represents the estimated cost of construction at bid award. This is our Design 2 line, our Design 2 budget. We as architects are estimating that this is the cost when we open the bids and what we'll receive for these items. One of the things that you'll see as we describe the various options and the cost line starts to increase, that we're providing an intense granularity to the project. There's many, many small things that need to be addressed. For example, this first slide has to do with improving interior circulation, which has to do with interior stair railings, door swings, floor leveling, corrections that comply with ADA codes on the first floor as well as the second floor. There are ADA clearance issues throughout the project that need to be corrected, including handrails, ADA counter heights, fixture types. And as the dots increase on the screen, you also notice that the cost line is starting to climb. Door lever handles, door stoppers, door closers. I believe that the original facility assessment had approximately 256 corrections associated with ADA, and these are all part of the option 1 improvement package. These start to increase. Pavement slope improvements, VCT tile replaced. Accessibility issues upstairs. Second floor restroom upgrades. One of the requests that came out of the focus groups was for more fixtures and that they be ADA compliant. It's highly likely that we're going to have to repurpose some of the office space. You can see these two red boxes and create additional restrooms on the second floor. One of the larger ticket items is the replacement of the mechanical system. It's outgrown its useful life. What you see here is the second floor mechanical room, and within that is outdated chiller systems and highly inefficient mechanical systems. The upgrade will be virtually building-wide, first and second floor, which will replace the existing mechanical system with energy-efficient systems, as well as upgrading the interior lighting. One of the first things that we heard in the focus group is it's difficult to see in here. And considering the age of the members and the attendees of the focus groups, it was clear that having a clean, well-lighted place for these programs is very, very important. And so in the second floor, this happens as well. And then as you walk around the building, you'll notice that there's the building envelope needs improvement, including repair leaks at the windows, skylights, roof, gutters, wood trim, repainting, and that there are a number of areas that have some profound leaks, including in the art room where there are roof-to-wall connections that need to be replaced. The roof was replaced a while back, but the interface between dissimilar finishes and materials is leaking. So at this point, where we've basically corrected the code issues, ADA upgrades, new mechanical systems, new lighting, and the building exterior envelope, we've almost spent $1 million. Once we do the improvements to the interiors, which is replace damaged gypsum board, floor coverings, paint, and address those issues, we've come to the end of our current contract, where the estimated cost of construction is around $1,058,000. And that is our budget as we understand it for construction costs at the moment. But as the focus group process continued, we realized that there's program enhancements that would clearly benefit the adult community center, and that these are subjects to and the focus of option 2. And what are they? Well, basically, the modern way of aging is really focusing on and emphasizing physical activity and the removal of specialty rooms. The current library, which is under where it says billiards right now, would be repurposed, and the billiards would move out of what's currently shown as the new fitness room. Billiards would be replaced into the library. The library, the hardbound books and things like that would be basically accessed down the street in the new library. The old billiard room would be improved and become a fitness room. Some changes to the office and reception area would take place. And we would also create a demonstration kitchen for cooking classes within the existing kitchen. Second floor, part of the mechanical room would be resized to add storage. Offices would be reshaped and resized to pick up some of the spaces that we lost when we created the new restrooms. And the current computer lab on the second floor would be turned into a multi-use room. Specific requests on the part of the focus groups were to provide sprung maple flooring in the park view room, the patio view room, and the fitness room. And what's this? This is flooring that you would see typically in dance studios and aerobic labs and things like that, that reduces the impact on joints and makes a more comfortable experience for the people who are doing the activities. And so we would add a sprung maple floor system. It's around 2.5 inches thick overall assembly. Importantly, the bottom part of the assembly is a rubber pad system that it absorbs shock. An additional request is for mirrors in the fitness room and for a kitchen demonstration island, which would allow for cooking classes and things like that, and nutrition classes on a smaller basis to happen in the current cafeteria size kitchen that's there now. Option 3 is site work improvements. You can see now by the end of Option 1 and Option 2, we're approaching $1.5 million in construction cost. The remainder between it and the total estimated construction costs, or approximately 1.7, would be taken up in site work improvements, which would include replacing the north concrete patio and adding a ramp that would connect to the city hall and replacing the north patio trellis. This outdoor area wasn't a part of the original scope of work, but is actually a very interesting and beautiful multi-use area that includes raised beds, outdoor seating, outdoor eating, and currently the existing patio has large gaps in it, trip hazards and things like that that could be mitigated by this new patio. The overall budget, now we're jumping from construction costs to total project costs. The cost common to all options is $250,000. Option 1, once you jump from construction to overall project cost, is $1.33 million. Option 2 is $483,000. Option 3 is $408,000. The total estimated project cost is $2.47 million. In order to do this work, though, it will take a certain amount of time, and we will need to close the existing facility for a number of months and relocate the programs. And what we're proposing to do is have temporary occupancy in the Wheeler Plaza facility. Now, one of the things that we're aware of is that this project, should you decide to go ahead with the other options, will take approximately 5 months of construction time, and therefore we would need to reoccupy, move out and occupy Wheeler Plaza during this period, and that there is another program that's going to be planned for this site, and that we would have to be out by late October 2015. Here's the interior of the space, of the Wheeler Plaza space. So that basically is an overview. Tonight you're being asked for a consideration of adding options 2 and 3 to the current project, and I'm available to answer questions should you have any. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Michael. Matt.
So the one question I have is, and it came up just at the end there when you talked about using the building on San Carlos Avenue, and I don't see anything in the budget here for temporary relocation and setup and so forth.
We are going to craft the contract so that moving services are included in that construction contract when we come back to you at a later time. So this is just
in the 2.4 right now, the 2.5.
Moving is included. Yes.
It is?
Yes.
Where is it hidden? Or where is it? Moving and it's in the moving and storage allowance. I didn't see it as
correct.
So that would
page 2, 25,000.
Okay, so that's moving stuff over there, setting
Right.
it up, using it, moving
Correct.
it back.
Correct. And the thought was not to recreate the adult center entirely, but to have similar to the library project where we had a little resemblance upstairs of the library. So this is not going to, the temporary space is not going to cover the entire center, but it'll look and feel similar to the operations currently.
Okay, I didn't recognize that line as what it was. Okay, good.
All right. Was that it, Matt?
That's it.
Okay. Bob.
You know, it's difficult for me to question professional costs because I feel I'm a professional. When I did it, I didn't really appreciate sometimes people asking. but I'm going to ask it. I'm a little confused on however you want to add it up here. It's $1,058,000 construction improvements. It's approximately, if you take that number, it's about 12% for the design. If you add, I'll even add the contingency to you. Now it's 10.4%. For two separate parts here, if you add them, just add them together, it's anywhere between 18 or 20%. And I guess I'm a little confused. If it's just an add-on, it would seem like to me that it would be less money, not more money. I mean, what was explained to us didn't seem real difficult. And I apologize to you because you're a professional, but this is the public money. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not going to vote for this until somebody explains it to me, I guess better than it has in the report, because that number hasn't been detailed. Why it costs more to do little parts unless there's a minimum. And again, everybody has a minimum. No, I'm serious. Everybody has a minimum. If you got a flat cost, just open the door. It's 100,000, 200,000, whatever it is. And I understand that, but I'm confused by that.
I'll ask Meryl Buck to explain the add-on design costs, if you don't mind.
Thanks.
Meryl is on our project team, as well as Anna Kertel, who's here in the audience from the Adult Community Center. And Meryl stepped in when Matt Lee recently exited. So,
yeah, thank you.
Meryl.
Mm-hmm. Serving as interim city engineer. So, yeah, and a lot of that has to do with our experience on not only the library remodel, but the first floor, and even this project. And you get into the nuances of change order work or piecemeal work, and where it's just a lot of times the littler scope can add, as a percentage, a lot more to the total project cost.
Okay, why don't we just make it one big project then? Instead of three parts, why don't we make one project? How's that working for you?
No, and it will. The plan, if you were to approve adding options 2 and 3.
I understand, Mayor. I'm being facetious.
Yeah.
I don't want to have an option 2 and option 3. I want to make it one option. So all the costs are in the top. Now, does that help my percentage? Or my design costs? You see what I'm getting at here? I'm just trying to understand. It just seems like there's a minimum because we're breaking it down. And I guess I'm not getting it. It just seems like because we're breaking it down, and again, I appreciate minimums. We used to have them in my company, but I don't get it here.
Yeah, I think some of it's the way it's presented, the common costs to all options.
Well, if you had presented this as one big thing, it'd be $260,000 over $1.8 million or whatever. I probably wouldn't even be piping up anything. But the way it's broken down here, I don't understand. And I apologize, but you're not explaining it to me, so I'm not going to vote for it unless somebody gives me some numbers. Maybe you can help me.
Well, what I'm seeing is it's about $260,000 for all the design on, and maybe I'm wrong, but on a $2.5 million project.
Yeah, I know. That's what it is total.
Okay.
But not the way it's broken down here.
Well, if you put them all
I understand that, but it's not presented. It's not presented that way.
Okay.
If that had been presented to me, I'd probably keep my mouth shut.
Yeah,
because the way it's presented here, it looks like there's minimums here. That's what it looks like to me.
In total, it's about 11%.
I get it,
Yeah.
but it looks like there's
Which
minimums.
is right in the ballpark.
There's minimums to me.
And
if I may, just as a design professional myself, I would say some of it's just, like you said, when you start out of the gate, you're going to charge a flat fee just because you're going out of the gate.
Exactly.
So,
and I understand that.
But I can't say if that's what it is. But yeah.
Well, okay, I appreciate, and
I wrote the staff report, and part of the struggle was to try and simplify what we're doing. And I was trying to explain that there's a previous decision to do the base work, and what we're considering tonight is adding that on. And some of this project costs common to all options. That assumes that you're going to do the whole thing, and so the percentages may shift. If you just did option 1, then those costs may go down because you're not doing the other options, and so your percentages would.
I do numbers. No, I get it. Okay. I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, I didn't mean to belabor this. So I'm not satisfied, so I'm going to be voting against the project, even though I approve all of it to be done, but not enough detail has been given me for design work, and I think it's overcharged somewhere. There's more money here than, for what I'm hearing, the add-on is for the work done. It just hasn't been explained to me, so sorry.
Perhaps while we're going through other council member questions, and my staff may want to think about how they might try to address this. Not that I'm trying to change your vote.
No, it doesn't have to be unanimous. I mean, again,
no, of course not.
I think it's Adult Community Center. Don't get me wrong, but it's a principle to me that I just don't understand it.
It's a good question, and I'm just suggesting to Jeff as he's stepping out there, maybe we can try and resolve it in real time. Cameron.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So I also have a question related to cost. So I was referencing back to our May 27th staff report on this issue, and it presented to us a project that was estimated to cost about $1.5 million. And so I'm trying to understand how the project has grown by in excess of $900,000 in that short period of time, and did we not anticipate the desire to increase the scope at that time?
We actually surpassed another fiscal year, so we took a few smaller projects that were programmed in your current capital improvement program and combined them all into this one project. So it was originally $1.5 million, and your current new capital 2-year budget includes $800,000. So at that point, we just combined all of the little issues, fixes, ADA issues, HVAC, all of those seismic study, all of those issues into the one project. So that's how you now have $2.4 million project.
So help me understand that. So in May, we thought it was going to be a $2.5 million, but we were in a different fiscal year, and so the staff report said 1.5, and it didn't mention the fiscal year switchover?
It didn't mention, no, because we didn't know that the HVAC would practically be almost $1 million, so it's eating up the entire project. So when we started this project, you had not approved your current fiscal year budget yet. So we've been working on this since February 2014.
Okay. But can you understand why when I got a staff report saying it was a $1.5 million project and I was asked to approve that I thought it was a $1.5 million project and I didn't expect a $2.5 million project to come back a few months later?
Yes.
Okay. And you're just saying that was, the first answer was that it was an accounting tweak. The second answer was that it was unanticipated costs from HVAC. So what was it?
The February meeting was originally $1.5 million budgeted from the prior fiscal year. Okay. As we moved forward in the year, and you recall, we took a break to study the aquatic center and all of that. So as we rounded toward...
The February meeting, I believe it was just a couple $100,000. Is that not right, for some emergency maintenance?
Well, back in February, we were still coming forward with the design.
Yeah.
And the project was still scoped at 1.5. So okay. As we created our new capital improvement project, we included $800,000 more, which you approved in June, I think it was. So therefore, the 2 fiscal years add up to 2.4 now. Okay. And as you saw in the presentation, the original project basically fixes a lot of great things, but does nothing to anything else in the building. It won't enhance programs. It won't provide ADA access from the rear of the building, those types of fixes. So that's where we stand now with a project budget, which is within your current capital program.
Okay. And then I guess...
Cameron, do you mind if I tag along? Because I just want to make sure I understand, because I had a similar question.
Okay.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, Christine, what we're saying is the primary driver of going from 1.5 to 2.4 is, my takeaway was, it's options 2 and 3. That, in other words, the $1.5 million was really what you're now calling option 1. And that's really all we talked about doing some months ago. And it's not per se the HVAC system or anything like that. It's those add-on enhancements that... Right.
If I may. Are we dueling? I was dueling with Matt earlier.
Oh, actually, I was trying to turn Christine's mic back on, the podium
you
mic.
might have just turned I might have turned her off when I...
There we go.
If I may, and I apologize if this was already explained. So basically, the reason the project budget has grown is simply because we've combined a number of projects that were approved by the council, all related to the ACC. And we've just dumped them into one project bucket so that as the project has evolved in its design sense and move forward, we'll begin to coalesce those projects to get better bidding and better cost on design work rather than moving forward with them all as individual projects.
And so the second piece of scope that you're saying was approved by the council was part of the budget process and it wasn't specifically called out. We didn't have an item on it. Is that right? Is that what you're saying?
There were specific project
As
items.
part of the budget, as part of the approval of the budget, but we didn't consider additional ACC scope remodel as a separate item.
Correct.
Okay. And so then what is it that we're being asked to do today if the money has already been appropriated?
Professional services agreement for design only for 130, 139, 130, 136.
There it is. So just to be very clear, what's missing right now is simply that the original design contract that was approved by the City Council didn't anticipate this larger scale design. And so that's what we're needing to, we don't even necessarily need to augment the funding. We need the council to approve the higher threshold for the contract because only the council can do that. We can't do that at the staff level once it exceeds $75,000. So maybe that's the confusion here. This isn't really a budget item. This is a item about the design work, and then they're showing you sort of how the design options are being laid out. And there's really three components to the design, and this is sort of directed at Bob a little bit. I'm going to give him a second so that he can.
I'm sorry.
I apologize. That's okay. I'm going to speak a little bit to your item earlier.
Okay.
So of the original contract, which I believe was in the neighborhood of $230,000, is that correct? That had envisioned, when the architect bid that work, they were bidding two things. All the different outreach and scoping and the exploration of the facility and working with the users of the facility to identify, sort of the wish list and the code and structural must-haves. That cost about $100,000, that work, and that was in the original scope of the contract that was approved. And then what we had envisioned as the original scope of the project cost about another $130,000. So as we've combined these other projects into one project, those budgets had anticipated design work also. So we've pulled all that money together. This new work that wasn't part of what they bid on cost $130,000 to design. And you may think that that's a high percentage relative to what we're getting, but that's the cost.
I understand. So, I don't mean to question the cost.
Just to fully explain it, that's the cost. And if you want to get into any more detail, you'll actually have to talk to the architect about their cost structure.
I understand. I have no detail in front of me, so I can't look at it. I don't understand it. It's half again as much for me. So other folks can do what they need to.
Cameron, you had other questions?
Not at the moment.
Okay. Ron.
Just a couple. When you were talking about the relocation of the facilities,
yes,
any provisions being made due to the fact that with the facilities located there, I assume people are going to be using it, so there's going to be additional parking demands?
There'll be some parking issues. Luckily, the actual building is ADA restroom, so that's advantageous. And we will be working with the Sheriff's Department to see if we can either relax the 2-hour parking there for the patrons or working with either Samtrans or another shuttle service, the Flex route, and getting folks to that facility by using a shuttle bus.
Okay. You mentioned something about there's a mini library in the facility now. Did I hear you correctly that those books are going to the main library?
No, I was just comparing this project to the temporary library that when the library project was under construction, I was just talking about the temporary library in the building.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sorry for that confusion.
Okay. From the stakeholder meetings that developed into options 2 and 3, were there any well, actually, I presume there were. What were the things that were suggested by the stakeholders that didn't get included in option 2 and option 3?
Oh, gosh.
And I'm not talking about every little thing. I'm talking about, are there significant things? And let me explain the context of the question. In my experience, what often tends to happen with public projects is there's sort of pent-up demand to fix things, and because money is always tight, it takes a long time to get there, and then projects get approved, and they end up growing over time because people are like, well, this is our one shot every 15 years to do this, and so why not do this, and why not do this, and why not do this? What I'm trying to do is get a little bit of a read on, we've got a project that, for reasons that staff has presented, has grown from X to Y. I'm trying to see what's out there, what's Z, okay? Because I want to understand how much pressure we're going to be under.
Okay, yeah. Okay, Michael would like to speak with that. Thank you.
First of all, thank you for these intelligent questions. And Councilman Griselli, one of the reasons why that you're seeing the fee jump is that we're adding some additional consultants that don't exist in the first contract. For one, we're going to be doing some structural work, removing an existing column, which is going to require some structural mitigations to the building, which will make the library space actually usable as a billiard room. And so we're adding a structural engineer and that fee set. And in option 3, we're actually adding a civil engineer because we want to get the grades right, and all the work that we do at the back of the building is going to have input from that civil. So we're sort of changing the fee mix by adding additional services to that, and that's reflective in that fee increase, as well as to we're going to be providing input on the temporary move and space planning for that over at Wheeler. I don't anticipate a lot of it, but we will be providing help to Anna and her team in that relocation, as well as developing move specifications, because Matt Lee, the prior city engineer, had a very great idea of assigning the responsibility for all the actual move, the coordination, and the move back in to the general contractor, so they're responsible for any delays that have to do with the move and the possible impact of Wheeler Plaza. We want to have most of the responsibility on their shoulders and not the city's. And so in that regard, there is value added, and that's reflected in the fee. To your point about the wish list and why did we stop it here, there were a number of things that were requested that haven't been reflected in the option 3 or the option 2. One, there was a request for a outdoor yoga area and meditative garden, and near the rear of the building there's a little grassy area sort of north of the proposed ramp in that area. And there was also a request for a more intensive look at the commercial kitchen. And if you go in the kitchen right now, you'll see a beautiful kitchen for the mass production of food. A lot of stainless steel and support space and serving areas and things like that. And there was a request to take a deeper look at that kitchen and possibly include things like pizza ovens and things that represent sort of popular cuisine now, and how could that relate to cooking classes and as compared to the mass production of food. At a certain point, we realized that we would probably spin past the budget, and so based on the number of comments that came back and the prioritization that was apparent, we stopped in the kitchen at the demonstration island.
Thank you. As you're answering my question, actually, it sparked another one of a related nature. The Eastside Connect project, which is an exterior project, it's not a building. One of the interesting things about its trajectory is, as we were opening up the ground and finding out what was really there as opposed to what we thought was there, costs ended up going up.
Yes.
That's sort of inevitable. So the question that occurs to me in this kind of project is, you obviously haven't ripped open walls to see what's actually there. What's your sense of the risk that we're facing, that we're going to start getting into this and, oh, we need another $300,000 because something ended up being significantly worse behind the scenes than we expected it to be?
Right. Great question. Well, right now, the city has created a contingency that you see in your budget. I think it's around 15% construction contingency or a change order contingency for unexpected surprises like you're describing. But I spoke at length with Merrill about this, and that we're recommending some destructive testing prior to going out to bid. What I'd like, in fact, in the week of November 12th, I'm bringing a very qualified and knowledgeable general contractor who has done a lot of repairs to building envelopes and things like that. Jim Lino, his name is, from Inverness. He's currently building a residential project for us and extremely knowledgeable about these sorts of things. I'm going to bring him to the site and get his perspective on the project from a general contractor's point of view, not just engineers, because there's sequencing and there's all sorts of things that is going to impact this project. And so what we're trying to get more eyes on it rather than less, and that's also included in our fee.
Thank you, Michael. My last question, I think, Christine, is for you. Although it may not be, the stakeholder groups that participated in the process that you've been going through over the last few months, since there are many users now of the facility, which used to be the senior citizen facility, and which to many of the long-term users is still known as the senior center. Right. But we've morphed it to include other things, over the last few years. What proportion of your stakeholder group was drawn from non-senior citizen populations? In other words, from representatives of the groups of these more recent uses?
I'd say very few. I would say it was 95% of the folks in attendance were daily users. They were the diehards, and very small percentage was.
I suspected that from some of the comments that I saw about what got included and what didn't. I'll just mention in passing that is a little bit of a concern to me, because I think the trajectory for that building is it's going to be serving a broader audience, and yet the stakeholder interviews and whatnot seem to have inadvertently focused on one particular subset, which was the perhaps the longer term subset, but.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Michael has a couple comments on that as well. Thank you.
Feel free to come back up, Michael.
Well, I actually, that's been addressed, even though you're correct. There wasn't a broad representation of younger members or other user groups. But what we tried to do was decrease the amount of specific use rooms and increase the multi-use and flexibility of the spaces, which will allow for virtually any use. And a great example of that is the park view room and the patio view room, how they connect right now. Well, they're connected by a rickety movable partition that basically makes them two rooms. And repairing that or replacing that is part of it. Changing the specific use of the billiard room and relocating it into the library opens up this broad, wider multi-use room, which is a fitness room, which would be available for a whole host of different activities. So space use is going from specific to more flexible is our approach, and we're hopeful that that will address many of the uses that would be brought to the facility from other entities in the community.
Perhaps I was misinterpreting it, but wasn't, for example, the spring maple floor? Is that not a modification that is in part due to the particular demographics that you were talking to?
Anybody who's active on that floor is going to appreciate it, be it dancing in a wedding reception because it's leased out for that, aerobics classes, Tai Chi. So it's a long-term 30 to 40-year material that is beautiful and warm and comfortable to walk on.
Okay, fair enough. I see we have more questions from Ron.
I do, thank you. I maybe this is a question for Jeff or Christine. Maybe I don't know who can answer it, but I'm curious at how much we've spent on maintenance and improvements on the ACC since it was built in 1981. Is there? You have an idea?
No, not.
I mean, have there been any major remodels in the last 33 years?
Re-roof about 3 years ago, put in a couple skylights, but it's essentially original with some fixes and repairs and patches.
I won't hold you to this, but any idea of if you could put a number to how much has been spent on it?
Over 30 years? Oh, gosh.
A wild guess would be fine.
What did was the roof about 400,000? Is that number sticks in my head as the roof was. With the major improvements to the building that we're talking about here, I would say that over 30 years we've probably spent less than $1.5 million on major improvements, with the lion's share of that being the roof and the flooring, which have been done in the not too distant past. In terms of routine maintenance, we don't have figures on more routine
I was
maintenance.
just trying to get an idea.
Not very much, to give you an idea, has been invested in the building.
Trying to get at. Next question is, do you have an idea of how many people are served every year by that facility? I mean, how many of our residents?
Sure. We've got a daily number that we can just project out. I would say it's over 100 a day, about 100, 125.
And maybe the same people, different people?
Same people during the day, and classes at night vary, so that would be different people coming for different classes every single night. So.
Okay. Then when I did my math, it looked to me, unless I'm missing something, the contingency looked to be about 10.5% of the overall project. And I know there's line items for 15%, 15%, but when I added up all the numbers that were contingencies and divided by the total, it was under 11%. And the question is, two questions: is that correct? And if it is correct, is it enough, or is it typical?
Through the chair, traditionally you just do contingencies on construction. That's the only. I mean, that's how construction. That's all you work it on. So it's 15%. You don't add it to all the soft costs and all that.
You don't add it. Okay.
There may be some in there, but it's nominal if it's anything. Traditionally, it's just done to 15%.
All right. And I think the architect answered my other question, which was, are the proposed changes useful to all adults? And
Absolutely.
I think I heard that what we're proposing to do is make the facility more flexible, more open,
much
more dynamic.
usable. Yeah, much more
to
usable.
serve more people.
Yes.
Of all ages. Well,
Correct.
adults of all ages. All right. I just want to make sure I understood that. Thank you.
All right.
Welcome.
Seeing that at this point there are no additional questions from the dais, we'll take, thank you, Christine, thank you, Michael. We will take public comment. Is there anybody who wishes to address the council on this item? Okay, seeing none, I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I will move to adopt Resolution 2014-106, a resolution of the City Council of the City of San Carlos authorizing staff to proceed with additional design options for the Adult Community Center interior remodel project number C9322, and authorizing the city manager to execute an amendment to the professional services agreement with Ross Drulis Kusenberry in the amount of $136,429.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion.
As we are simply talking about not to send the wrong message that we're talking really about the whole project here. Really what we're talking about is a fee for design. And as we've been talking and asking questions, I've been doing some math. And I appreciate Mr. Gracilli pointing this out, because I'm coming up with the same conclusion that, to me, these design fees are not where I would like to see them for as part of the total project cost. Because it looks to me it's going to be a total of about $371,000 on construction improvement cost of just under $2 million, and then some soft costs being anything from moving to IT communications of about $140. So I don't know, when I do the math on it, I would really like to see the design fees come out at about 203, 205, somewhere in there. And what that's doing is taking the construction improvement costs, totaling them up, contingencies, everything, doing a 10% on that, and on the soft costs doing about a 5%, because that's, I don't know, that's the way I look at it. So I'll not be voting in favor of this unless, and we can't sit here and negotiate with the architect now,
Right.
but
Yeah.
that's the way I'm looking at it.
Through the chair, I'm wondering, I do have some similar concerns. I'm wondering if there's an option to ask staff to bring this, to basically table this and ask staff to bring it back with more information.
Well, I was going to actually suggest that if you guys hadn't made the motion. Okay. There's always that option.
I'll make a couple comments. I mean, so I want to say to Christine, I did go back and look at the February meeting and the May meeting and the document for the budget, and you are right. There was a consent calendar request in February. It was for a $1.5 million project, and then additionally $1.5 million in May, and then in the budget process there was an additional request for $800,000. I think it speaks a little bit to some of the improvements we've been talking about in the budget process that I don't think we had sufficient time to discuss that particular. I don't think there was any discussion on that item, and so because we had been focused on this $1.5 million project, the idea that there was an additional $800,000 of scope was lost to me. The second thing is that in the way we've looked at this project tonight, the staff memo lays it out with a series of options, but there aren't actually options. I mean, we're not being asked to say, do we want option one, option two? It's just addition. It's basically of the $800,000 that was already appropriated, here's how we would like to spend it, which is perfectly fine. And all of the things that are suggested seem like great additions to the ACC. But then when you wrap it in that way, and then the additional design fees are tied onto those options, it starts to get very confusing and difficult to evaluate whether, as you know, Bob said, we're spending the public's money effectively. Really what this is a $2.5 million project that has already been appropriated. And then the question is, how much should design, how much should we pay for design on top of that? Which is a good question, but I agree with my colleagues that it would be good to get a little bit more transparency into that.
Would it be appropriate to withdraw the motion, because it seems like we are headed toward sending this back for more information and maybe a representation of the facts?
It's your motion.
Just asking for.
No. That's fine. I'm not trying to be obnoxious, Ron. I'm just saying, in all seriousness, it's yours. And if at any point the maker of a motion feels that he wants to change his mind, you can do that.
Okay. Well, and I don't want the impression to be given that I am not in favor of this project. I think all of these things need to be done. And just for the record, let me just make a couple of comments. If you amortize the costs of this over the last 33 years, that's about $75,000 a year. I think if we had kept this facility in good repair over the last 33 years, we probably wouldn't have spent $75,000 a year. It is a community benefit for all. And I think that, what we are looking at is creating a facility that is really what it should have been all along. So in that spirit, though, I think I will withdraw the motion, because I don't think that there's any point in going forward with it right now when it appears that it's probably not going to pass. So maybe we ought to, I will withdraw it, and we can have it come back with a clear explanation and maybe some more work done on the numbers, so that we can, ultimately approve a project that we understand, that we can explain to people, and that is going to be very justifiable.
Okay, Matt.
So just to be clear, because Cameron said something about it being a $2.5 million project, and I understand he's rounding there, but for me, when I add it all up, I come up with a project of 2.1 million, and then there's the design fees. And so what I'm really saying is I'm happy with the project. I'm happy with the construction and the plans and what needs to be done to the building. But we're being asked to approve an add-on to a design fee, and that's what I'm not approving.
Through the chair, maybe I can make a motion to have staff come back to us with details on option 1 design. Also, I didn't get a chance to ask this question. Breakdown of the concept, design, and construction support, and then the design for option 2 and option 3. That's all personally. The rest of it's pretty self-explanatory. But those 4 items, those 4 lines, are the ones that I'd like to see detailed out. So I'd make a motion that we table this, have staff go back and analyze that, and give us some detail, and then present the project to us.
Friendly amendment, if I may.
Yeah, sorry.
The architect had mentioned engineering cost, and if there is engineering cost, I think we need to see it.
Well, I think that's what I meant. The breakdown of all these costs.
Very good.
May I make a suggestion, see if it meets with the 2 years approval? I'm not actually sure that we need a resolution to do that. I think that could be staff direction saying, because it sounds like what we're doing is to ask staff to bring it back.
Fine.
Yeah.
No motion needed.
Okay.
Mr. withdraws his motion.
Okay. Jeff.
Yeah, happy to do that. Happy to bring it back for the council. But I will say this. I have never seen the council ask for or be presented with this level of detail on a project in terms of the various design elements. And I'm not, I just want to understand, are we setting a precedent here? Is this something that the council they want to see the detailed breakout of every professional service on every project we bring forward? Or is this one just special for some reason that I don't understand?
My reason? It's presented poorly. I can't understand why you have 20% down here on the bottom and 10% on the top. Okay. Put it all together, I probably wouldn't have went, whoop, okay, fine, we've got 11%, we're good. But I think it's, and we spoke to that and some other issues about items that are presented to us, and I think this is a classic example, at least in my case, of at least one council member not understanding what in the blazes they're doing here. Okay. And I personally do not want to go into micromanaging professional services, and I mentioned that at the first part, and if I offended anyone, I apologize, but this one just doesn't make any sense to me. If it came together, if it was one giant project, I probably wouldn't have said a word. But now now that we're here, I want to break down, especially, I did not ask about concept design and construction support. I don't know who's getting paid there. And again, you say the magic word design. That's what Matt added up. He added that one into the other ones. And so, honestly, I'm not trying to, I don't ever anticipate doing this again. But the way it's presented to me here, I can't vote for it. So that's how, maybe that's not a good explanation, but that's my explanation today. So.
All right. Fine. I think we will table this. It'll be brought back. We've provided staff with some direction. I just wanted to make actually two brief comments. One, to something that Cameron had mentioned, and I could be wrong on this, but my perspective or sense about when we go through the capital budget process, we're not actually appropriating money at that point. We're actually sort of saying, yeah, that looks like it'd be an interesting thing to think about doing, as opposed to some other things that aren't interesting to do. And there's this multi-step dance we go through, which I admit I find very confusing personally, about gradually unpeeling the onion and saying, well, now we actually are committing. So that's just a minor clarification thing. I don't think we're actually committing it when we were approving the budget. It was more of a notional thing.
That appears to be what was said tonight, or at least that's what I took from staff tonight.
And I took the same thing too, which is why I don't mind having this item brought back, because the one item I would like to add to the staff direction is I would like a clear, simple answer or analysis that explains how the project cost grew. Because I think I heard I heard 2 or 3 clear, simple explanations tonight about how the project cost grew. I just want to know which one's the real one. And I don't mean to imply that people are misleading us. I just think that we're doing this on the fly as opposed to sitting it down and explaining it. Because I thought your original question about that was very good. I agree with it. You know, it's how does it go from 1.5 to 2.5? All right. So that completes for tonight item 9C. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Christine. We will now go back to the normal rotation, and we will take up item 9A, consideration of adopting. Well, you can't leave. I was going to have to banish you, remember? Okay, I'm banishing Jeff Maltby because we're going to adopt a resolution or discuss adopting a resolution amending his employment agreement as city manager, and he can't be in the room while we're doing that. So I presume there is a staff presentation?
Mr. Mayor, I'll make the presentation. As you may recall, I was the designated labor negotiator for this modification to the city manager's employment agreement. The staff report's fairly self-explanatory. The suggested modification that the council is considering tonight would increase the city manager's monthly compensation by 3%, from $18,878 to $19,444 per month. That would be retroactive to March 25th, 2014, which is the anniversary date of the city manager's ascension to the city manager position a few years back. It would, commencing next year, provide for a COLA increase, cost of living increase for the city manager's compensation package commensurate with that provided to the management group. It would increase the automobile allowance that the city manager currently receives from $500 a month to $525 a month, with also future annual COLA increases on that amount starting next March. And then there's a new provision in the contract that would allow for a completely discretionary increase to the completely discretionary bonus of up to 10% of the city manager's salary. In future years, it's not being requested or offered at this time, but it would be something that would be available for the city council in future years after review of the city manager's performance. There's a resolution attached that has basically those provisions in it.
Questions for Greg? Okay. Seeing none, is there anybody from the public who wish to comment on this item? Okay. I see no call for that as well. I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
I move we adopt resolution number 2014-106. 106, did you say? 106, a resolution of the City Council of the City of San Carlos amending the employment agreement with Jeff D. Maltby, City Manager.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion or comment?
I'll comment. I am going to be voting no on this, and it's primarily, I mentioned some of these things when we were meeting in closed session on it, and one of them has to do with the car allowance, and I've given that further thought as over the 2 weeks, and I remember a while back the county was looked at for offering car allowances to certain employees, and the thing that was being looked at that time was car allowance versus just turning in an expense report to try and get an idea of, how much is an employee actually using their vehicle for business purposes. I don't know that we ever went through that exercise. I'm not sure how we came up with the 500, but to me that seems like a rich number already. Adding to it, I just don't see the need to do that. And the idea of giving a bonus, I think is really problematic. I don't know how you set up an algorithm for something like that when you're a public agency and not a for-profit corporation. And then finally, on the 3%, I'm pretty much okay with it, but I did feel like it was a little rich given the status of the salary currently. And I know it was given to other, employees of ours in the management, but their salaries are lower than the city managers to start with. So that all said, I'm really happy with Mr. Volpe's performance, and so my comments on compensation do not reflect anything about how he's doing his job.
Other comments? Bob, did you want to say something? Okay. I just want to say that I think Jeff's been doing a very, very good job. I've been very impressed in working with him. I've worked with a lot of executives over the course of my private sector business career and over the course of being an elected official for over a decade now. Actually, I guess it's about 14 years. And he is very definitely one of the best public executives that I've had the opportunity to work with. I did want to make a comment that since there have been some confusing reports in the news media, the notion of him becoming part of or being given a cost of living increase identical to what in the future will be given to the management unit, I actually view as a good thing. Basically, what it says is after we brought him on at a below market salary because he had never been in the big chair before, and he proved himself being in the big chair, we set his salary to recognize that, and I was perfectly comfortable doing that last year. And now what he's basically saying is that he wants to be considered part of the management unit. I actually think that's a big plus. Yes, he is eligible for a bonus opportunity, assuming it gets approved tonight at the discretion of the council. But bottom line, where he starts out from is being part of the same team that he leads. And to me, that almost does fall in the category of walking the walk. So I'm more than happy to support this. I also think that I have no doubt that the council will exercise good financial and business judgment in terms of ever handing out a bonus in the future, and I have no doubt at all that we will work out how to do that. So if nobody has any other comments, Crystal, you can call the roll.
Councilmember Collins?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
No.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Mayor Obert?
Yes. All right. Can somebody go out and tell Jeff he can come back in?
Still has a job.
If he wants to.
He still has a job, right? The good news is you still have a job. So I thought you'd like to know that.
Your probationary period has been extended.
Your probationary period has been extended.
It's gone from 1 year to another year to another year.
Yes, yes. And the council did vote 4-1 to approve the recommendation, adopt the resolution. You're quite welcome. And I will say that all the comments that were made were quite laudatory of your execution of your job.
I appreciate that. Can I say just a quick word, just of thanks to my staff, who I think makes me look good in the performance of my job. So I appreciate all the work they do in supporting me.
So no,
and this guy too, right here, is the only guy in the city who doesn't work for me.
All right, that brings us to item 9B, consideration of adopting a resolution appropriating $500,000 from the city's general fund's unappropriated balance to augment the city manager's professional services budget to hire temporary special project management staff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. There's no PowerPoint presentation to go along with this request. I think it's fairly self-explanatory why we're asking. It's a little vague on the details of what we will be purchasing, and that's because I haven't gone through the trouble yet of going out and starting to explore the market, who's available, and what it's going to cost. But how I arrived at that number was essentially looking at three positions in my mind on a temporary basis, sort of a near full-time, but for a limited duration of time, of approximately a year, which would take us into the next fiscal year, of an executive management level position with a reduced benefit type package, probably in the neighborhood of $150,000, analytical support, so maybe in the $90,000 to $110,000 range, and clerical administrative support for those functions. I think there's a lot of research, there's a lot of coordination involved in the tasks that are outlined in the staff report, primarily the investigation and potential preparation of a bond measure on a short timeline that currently right now has a very wide range of possible projects that could be included that obviously would have to be narrowed down significantly, as well as some professional services support in there. I'll give you an example. Facilitation, I think that this number will be able to cover that. We had talked about the council wanting to do in relationship to a bond measure some public outreach meetings, a series of meetings after the first of the year to engage the community, to talk about the desires of the community and what they'd like to see either added to the community or existing infrastructure enhancements that they would like to see. These are all doable. It's the timeline that's really driving the need right now. The city is as busy as I have ever seen it in my tenure here. The number of development applications that are coming in are keeping the planning department very busy. In fact, we're likely going to come back and ask for an augmentation later this year in planning. That'll be paid for out of the additional fees that we're generating from all these planning applications, but we're burning through the contract dollars there rather quickly. As you know, we've got a very ambitious capital project budget, including the project we just talked about coming forward, as well as a whole number of sewer, streets, and other infrastructure projects that are keeping our engineers and our public works folks busy. We've got a very ambitious new community engagement process happening right now. So it's just a very busy workload normally that we have, and then a very new ambitious strategic plan. We're very excited. We think the council came up with a lot of really great priorities and things to look at for the city, but we are light on bodies to be able to tackle this work in a timely manner, particularly the bond measure being probably the most timely. But I think there was a real strong desire on the council's part to see a potential partnership on shuttles explored in a relatively short time frame. Those are I think the two that are going to take up the largest amount of time, as well as some downtown parking things, and we've been talking about some of those things in closed session that have the potential to move forward. We're very lucky that we're in the position that we saved quite a bit of money in last year's budget in combination with additional revenues that have come in to the tune of about $4 million. And we had an unfunded balance of about $3 million going into the year, so that's about $7 million. Most of that money I will assign to Fund 25 for the capital budget, so that we'll be able to do even more capital work in the future. But some of that I'd like to hold back and use as a one-time expenditure to augment the staff for the next year, so that we can begin to move the council's priorities forward. Be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions for Jeff? Well, I actually have two. Procedurally, Jeff, basically what this resolution does is it increases a line item in your budget. What do you anticipate, if anything, will be coming back before the council before funds are actually expended?
Any contract over $75,000 would require council approval as opposed to my own approval. I don't think a single one of the positions that I described to you would be less than $75,000 for an annual contract. So they'll either be coming back to in one bundled contract if we can do that through some sort of professional municipal government staffing agency or something, management partners, a consultant. You get one big one back. If they come in as sort of individual contract providers, you'll have a number of contracts come back before you that'll require council approval.
Okay. And then the other question I had is some of the tasks that you went through, particularly the two that you emphasized as the two high-profile things because of how quickly we would like them pursued, they actually, I think, require a fairly high-level expertise in the positions you can hire. So I'm just curious, I'm not asking this really as a financial question. Do you actually think that those people are available?
Absolutely, I do. I'm thinking I'm looking for a retired city manager who's got experience with having done bond measures in their community in the past, or a retired community development director, planning director, something of that nature, where we can tax the real world experience that they've gotten in other cities. There's certainly, Management Partners has a list of consultants that fit that bill that's about a mile long. So I think we'll be able to find somebody that will be able to bring a lot of expertise and hit the ground running for these specific areas we're looking for, so that we can get them off, get them rolling, and then start to blend them in with the staff workload as we move forward.
All right. Any other questions? If not, I will entertain did you have a question?
No, I want to make a motion.
Go for it.
To show staff and the city manager that I don't micromanage every single report that comes through here, and haven't actually in 9 years done that very often, I'd like to make a motion to approve resolution number 2014-107, resolution of the City Council of the City of San Carlos appropriating $500,000 from the city's general funds unappropriated balance to augment the city manager's professional service budget to hire temporary special project management staff.
Is there a second?
I second.
There is a second. And by the way, you couldn't micromanage it. He just gave you one number. It's nothing to ask. So, motion and a second. Is there discussion?
Just comment.
Yes.
So I hear what Jeff is saying about the different projects and how he's going to break it. It'll be brought to us broken down. I'm going to vote for this, but my comment is that when it gets broken down, we see the different parts and pieces. It's hard to, it's easy to vote yes on this because it's such a big thing. It's got so many parts and pieces. I don't agree with all the parts and pieces. So as they come forward, I'll have, a more critical eye on some of them. One of them, for example, and I'll just share this, is the idea of a bond measure and then having somebody from the city work on that and talk to the public and so forth. One of the things that always concerns me about these kinds of things is that whatever agency is proposing a bond measure kind of gets a head start, if you think of it as a race, versus a group within the public that might want to oppose it because they're getting started later on any kind of campaign, whereas I understand the city's not really campaigning, but they do get the advantage of putting all their ducks in a row and the information and so forth, and then whatever campaigns in favor of the bond measure gets to take that information and run with it. The opposing side doesn't get that advantage. So that's a thing that's always concerned me, and in this case it concerns me as well. I don't want to do a snow job on the public, convincing them that they need this or that, and we should do a bond measure for it. I really want to be transparent with the public. But, all in all, I think there's some good parts and pieces in here. Primarily, just one more comment, the thing that I really think there's a lot of people that are excited about it. I've seen some emails going back and forth, is just this idea of the Black Mountain water property and what we might be able to do if we were to purchase that. So.
Okay, other comments?
Yeah, the only thing I'd like to say is that I would hope that the consultants would do the studies which would tell us whether or not they think it makes us any sense or makes sense for us to go forward with a bond measure. I mean, to me, that's one of the true values of having the research done. Nobody wants a snow job and nobody wants a big sales job. But if we're going to do this, we need to know that support is there. And if it isn't there, then we don't do it.
And I just want to add, for clarity's sake, that there are going to be other specific costs associated with the bond measure, like polling and those types of things that will be separate from what we're talking about here today. And the point that you're making, Matt, is a very good one, and that will be separate also. The council can decide when and even if we get to that point, how much of the city's time and money they want to spend actually promoting. What I'm mostly focused on right now is trying to create a bond measure. What is that bond measure? What's in it? not so much promoting it to the public. We don't even know what would be included right now. And so answering that question as quickly as possible, I think, is going to be really important for the council to meet the timelines you've got. In terms of the campaign, we'll give those choices to you, but that'll be way down the road after we've figured out what, if anything, we're actually putting on a ballot.
And I would just add to that, echoing a lot of that sentiment. I understand the issue Matt is raising, and it's definitely one that, as elected officials, you have to be careful about. But fundamentally, if you're even thinking about doing a bond measure, the only reason you're thinking about doing it is to generally create something. Sometimes you're repairing something, but usually you're creating something. And in our case, the first thing we have to figure out is what the heck does the community want us to create? And that's going to take a fair amount of work. Because this is a manner of helping the community figure out what, if anything, it wants to do to improve the quality of life in San Carlos. All right. Is there anybody, I forgot to do this, is there anybody from the public before we have the discussion who wishes to address the council on this matter? Okay, seeing none, and we've had our discussion. Crystal, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Collins?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Mayor Obert?
Yes. Okay, that brings us to item 9D, consideration of introducing an ordinance adding Municipal Code Section 8.10, establishing water conservation measures in time of emergency or drought. And Tony, thank you for sitting through the entire evening. I suspect this is not your first rodeo when it comes to that.
Mr. Mayor and council members, I am going to be presenting this ordinance for introduction tonight. The ordinance would add a chapter 8.10 to the city's municipal code to encourage additional or provide an additional tool for the city to encourage water conservation during a drought emergency. The city of San Carlos is not a water provider to San Carlos residents. Our provider is the California Water Service Company, also known as Cal Water. You may have seen other cities that have ordinances that have such things as ability to shut off water or create penalties in the rate structure. But since we don't have that tool available to us, you have a proposed ordinance that provides for very specific prohibitions during a declared drought emergency that would enable the sheriff's department or city staff to issue citations to people who are violating those very specific water conservation measures. Currently, there is a declaration in place by the governor, and Cal Water has implemented, I think it's Rule 41 measures, 14, excuse me, 14, there's a Rule 14 measure that came through the California Public Utilities Commission that sets forth conservation measures that are in effect in the Cal Water area. So that is incorporated in the ordinance that you have before you tonight. This ordinance itself does not create those or implement those measures. After the ordinance is adopted and becomes effective, which won't occur for 30 days after the adoption, sometime in the middle of December, the council would have the ability to take up its own emergency declaration that would then implement the measures and put them into effect that would enable us to enforce those provisions. This supplements what Cal Water is doing, and there is a representative of Cal Water here tonight that can describe what they're doing. I note that today they did present to the city a letter supporting the proposed ordinance, and the main enforcement tool that we will have is going to be a misdemeanor. Excuse me, that's incorrect in the staff report. It's not misdemeanor citations. It'll be infractions. They're going to be like parking tickets that have some fines, but repeat offenders could be cited repeatedly, but they won't be misdemeanors. They'll just be infractions. So I think I covered the next slide. I'm getting new at doing PowerPoint, so I apologize for not for covering in advance of my slide. But you could have your declaration as early as the first meeting in January of 2015. So that's the end of my presentation. If there are any questions.
Thank you, Greg. Questions for staff?
Yeah, I have a few. Is there not enforcement measures that can be taken by both the water provider and by the state when they declare these drought emergencies?
Yeah, Cal Water has some mechanisms that they can employ, and I could be corrected, but through their rate structure, they are able to impose higher rates and their own penalties. In really extreme cases, they can put water restriction on someone's meter so that they can only draw so much water during a day or during a billing period. And we don't have that tool as a city. All we can do is something like this, where we can prohibit certain behaviors that is supportive of what Cal Water can do, because if Cal Water's not successful, we can now employ our tool of citations that are infractions, like a parking ticket. We can add that.
And having said that, who actually polices this, and how does it actually get implemented? Meaning, does it take a complaint of a neighbor, or police officers driving by see somebody with broken sprinkler heads, or how does this get implemented?
Well, the way it'll be implemented is like many of our city code provisions will be on a complaint basis. I suppose hypothetically an officer or a code enforcement officer of the city could see a broken sprinkler head shooting into the air and could then issue a citation if they actually observe something. But mostly it's going to be on a complaint basis as opposed to sending out active patrols looking for people who are wasting water in violation of the ordinance. Now, I'm just going to mention this again. None of this can, by introducing and adopting this ordinance, that will not put into effect directly the conservation or rationing measures that are stated in the ordinance. It's going to take a separate action by the council to declare a drought emergency that would then implement those ordinances.
And there's one line in here that I'm a little confused on. It's, line L under, let's see, what section is this? 8.10.050, non-essential uses, and it says excess watering of new planting or replanting of any water-dependent landscaping, and it goes on to including but not limited to, etc. That term excess watering is there's no definition of it.
Well, we'd be looking at that on a case-by-case basis. It's going to be one of those cases where somebody sees somebody planting, expanses of seeded lawn area or something along those lines that are that we know from the information provided by the water service provider or through a publication is excessive use of water. And that is under the rationing, that's under the water conservation section and the rationing section. So if we get a complaint that water is running off, or somebody's just planted in a new very large area of water-dependent landscaping, usually we're talking about grass or those types of high-usage landscaping plantings, that we'd get a complaint and we'd do an investigation, and there could be a citation from that. there might not be a citation from it if it's determined that it's not excessive and or it's something that may have been approved by the city through a project. We'd look at that. It could be that the sprinkler, that it's not being sprinkled by a low drip system or a type of system that is designed to conserve water, and it's just somebody installed a sprinkler system that just sprays a lot of water and is not an efficient type of landscaping. Those are probably examples of how that might come into play.
But it is, as it stands now, it's pretty open-ended.
It is open-ended. I think it's designed to be that way because we can't anticipate every possible circumstance where someone might be doing excessive planting in their yard.
Excessive watering, I think you meant.
Excuse me, excessive watering of that type of new planting or replacement planting.
Okay, those are my questions. Thanks.
Other questions? I had a couple, but I'm just going to mention for those of you who are following, Bob Grisili just left the dais. He did that out of an abundance of caution about the possibility of there being a conflict for him on this particular item. He explained to me what it was. It didn't seem to me that it was, but out of the abundance of caution, he is no longer here, and that's why he has stepped out. I just had a couple of quick questions. One has to do with staffing levels for inquiries and/or reports and complaints that we're going to get. Because, I mean, I'm sure we all are already getting emails from people about stuff, and I suspect when this comes into effect early next year, there will be a big jump up in that. Has staff factored that into their resource planning?
Yeah, as you know, we contract with code enforcement through San Mateo County, and we will likely look to augment that contract if this really is a very heavy lifting area. Relative to the overall contract, we don't think it's actually going to be that much work. While there may be a number of complaints, the complexity of those complaints relative to, say, building complaints and those kinds of things is usually pretty small. I mean, you may have a debate with people about how much water they're using or when they're watering or the fact that they have a broken sprinkler, but they're not usually real high cost items, or there's not usually a whole lot of emotion.
And then,
there can be, but
conceptually related to that, are we planning on spending some resources on outreach for this? This is a increased, heightened level of involvement by the city in this area, and just in order to be fair to people and not catch them off guard, and also to indicate that this is a very serious issue and we want everybody to take it seriously, that requires some outreach and communication. So is there a plan for doing that?
Absolutely. And as I'm sure you all have seen over the last few weeks, we've already started that outreach effort to a certain extent, and just drawing attention to the drought whenever we can and what the city's doing for the drought. I grew up in the Bay Area, so I remember the droughts in the 80s, which over time, because of all the various government entities that were doing outreach, really starts to become part of everybody's consciousness. And so we want to, I don't think by any means we're going to be leading the charge, but we want to be one of the voices in the chorus to let people know not only the seriousness of the drought, but what we're doing and what they can do to help with the drought, and to the extent that these types of regulations are put in place by the council, what they're expected to do in the drought.
Okay. Any other questions for staff?
Mr. Mayor, can I just add one point that, and it's arises out of Councilmember Grocot's question. I did build in an appeals process. So if somebody, for instance, wants to be proactive and or gets a citation, they can get they can go to the appeals board that's created and ask for permission to do something that might otherwise be prohibited. and then they won't be getting citations for that type of activity any longer.
Fair enough.
If I may, then follow up on that. The appeals board is made up of whom?
The city manager, the administrative services director, and the public works director, or their designees. So it may be the three of them, or it may be members of their staff.
All right. Is there anybody from the public who wishes to address the council on this issue? Feel free to come up, Tony. You can fill one out afterwards, and we can probably fill in the blanks for you if you like.
Mr. Council members, Mr. Mayor and staff, I wanted to, if I'm a little tired, I've been up since 3 a.m., so I apologize. I want to thank the city for moving or at least considering this ordinance. I see some communities looking at this and others are not. And the ones that we work with and are partnering on some of the ordinances, we're really seeing some really good results. And so when I had learned of this, I was really excited to see what the draft was. And not only that is to partner, whether there's an ordinance or not. Cal Water wants to partner with the city. And I know that there's a lot of question as to how this all is going to work out because it's very vague. The guidelines from the governor and also from the regional board and the other agencies are fairly vague. And so it gives us an opportunity to really work with the community and the city in a really good partnership so that we can see some really good results. I will say this, I manage several towns and cities on the peninsula. San Carlos already does an outstanding job. The one thing that we're really looking at doing, and it's part of even what I see in the ordinance, is really we want to see these long-term results, not really short where you just, where there is either a fine or you shut a customer off. We want to change the culture of our water use. And so we put in a really good education plan, and that's something we're wanting to continue, and that's our communication plan and educating our customers, working with the towns and cities on their parks. That's really important for, again, the long term. So we're, by doing this, Cal Water is very supportive of this. I think, again, it'll help grow our partnership and really educate our customers even more so than they are today. We're looking at in our future budgets to even get some more money in light of the drought. And with that money, maybe we can partner with the city on some resources. That's probably the toughest thing right now is resources. Currently, we're on a stage 2. There's stage 1, 2, and 3. Stage 3 enforcement is basically somebody who wastes water. You have to catch them in the act because we're currently, as you're aware, we're getting a lot of calls from neighbors who are just, we go out there, you can't see a drop of water on somebody's lawn, although we're getting calls that the neighbor is overwatering, so that's somewhat difficult. So we have to really catch somebody, and so having the additional resources out there, I think, will really be helpful in the future. So we can really partner with the city on some of those resources, and if not, utilizing our mail system to get flyers out to our customer, whatever we need to do to continue to be successful in this area. So I just wanted to say that Cal Water supports the ordinance, and we're here to help in any way we can.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate the comments. Seeing nobody else looking to comment on this, I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move we introduce ordinance number
1479.
1479. Thank you. 1479, an ordinance of the City Council and of the City of San Carlos adding Municipal Code Section 8.10, establishing water conservation measures in time of emergency or drought.
I second.
There's a motion and a second, but before we move to discussion, I need a motion to extend the meeting by 5 minutes.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, seeing none. There's a motion and a second. Discussion.
Well, I asked the questions I did, because I am concerned about those parts, and I don't know. I just feel like this is being redundant to, you've already got, the state has authority, the water provider has authority, and I would rather see the city of San Carlos take the approach of similar to what the city manager was referring to. He's, like he said, he's lived here, he's seen droughts before. I've lived here a long time. I've seen a number of droughts as well. But, I think with a citizenry like San Carlos, education does the job. We've already seen during this period so far, a great deal of savings in water usage throughout the city. I just think we have, smart citizens and people who are conscientious, and they're willing to cut back on their water if we're in a drought period. And so we've already seen those good results. I don't think we need to add to the police state, to save on water. I think there's a more friendly, nicer way to do it.
Any other comments? I would just briefly say that I certainly understand the perspective of not wanting to burden people unnecessarily with regulation. I probably would quibble about adding to the police state, since I don't believe we're in a police state. But to me, this is a common sense thing to do to make sure, reinforce the message of what we expect people to do. We actually have a very educated citizenry when it comes to following traffic laws and not getting into accidents, and yet we still have stop signs and we still hand out tickets and whatnot, because the truth of the matter is we all make mistakes and we all make errors of judgment, and that's why we have laws in part. So I think this is a common sense thing to do, and I think it's important that, as the Cal Water representative said, as Tony said, they are looking forward to the additional help that we can provide by doing this. I think that's important. So with that, Crystal, call the roll, please.
Councilmember Collins?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
No.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Mayor Obert?
Yes. And I believe with that, we are adjourned.